Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about What If Naruto Brother of Akeno Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A warm feeling filled his chest as his eyes slowly opened once again, taking in the deep ocean blue water around him as he floated there. No difficulty breathing whatsoever, no heavy weight on his chest from what should be the starting feelings of pressure pushing on his body. The boy we were watching was a teen, one that had recently turned 16, his toes tilted downwards, yet still only barely touching what seemed to be a sheet of glass extending out, further and further beyond the realm of possibility. "What are we doing today, Naruto?" A voice chimed as a small light blue orb appeared, hovering in front of the face of the teen. The teen, now known to be Naruto, lifted his left hand up and batted the orb away lightly. "The same thing we did yesterday, Alpha, and the day before that, and the day before that. Yay. Alpha was the name of Naruto's sacred gear. It was only after he fell ill though that he had been able to unlock it. That was by spending copious amounts of time looking deep inside of himself as his body rested and healed in the tank that contained him. He had long since lost track of how long he had been inside of here, and if it wasn't for Alpha, he may have driven himself to the point of insanity. Then again he was talking to a glowing orb that apparently lived inside of his body. Inwardly he sighed, wasn't hearing voices like one of the possible signs of insanity. Naruto clenched his fist tight and pursed his lips slightly, his body felt tense, yet he couldn't tell why. Something must be happening on the outside. It irritated him to no end that he couldn't see outside of his body anymore. Shaking his head lightly he looked at Alpha, who seemed to be trying to figure out what he was thinking by staring at his face. Was it even possible for a glowing orb with nothing that could resemble an eye to stare? "What are you doing?" "Well, Naruto, I learned by studying everything around me. Currently you are frustrated at your own inability. Though you really shouldn't be, seeing as with me by your side, we could be unbeatable." Naruto gave a dull nod as he rubbed at the back of his head before sitting down on the glass panel below him. He was about to start practicing with Alpha again, only for a bright light to shine down on him as a bullet flew right past his face, causing him to blink in shock. "Oh look, we are waking up Naruto. I guess things are going to be different from yesterday after all. Bubbles rose to the top of a tank. It was filled with light blue water, helping to support the life inside of it. Standing before the tank was a young boy with blonde hair and gray eyes, a small mole under his left eye as he looked at the floating body inside. It was his half-brother, older by 2 years. From what he could remember they had the same mother, yet there was no father for Naruto, at least that is what their mother proclaimed over and over. His brother was named Naruto, while the younger one had been given the name of Kiba. Kiba placed his hand against the glass between them. He hadn't spoken to Naruto in months. Well, he hadn't heard a response. He had spoken to his brother, but the older blonde hadn't been able to respond. "Things aren't looking good, Naruto. Alper is going mad and everyone is scared. I don't know if you can hear me, brother, but I don't know how much longer we will remain here." There was a knocking at the door and Kiba turned on his feet, missing the twitching of Naruto's brows. The large metal door slid open and showed men covered in black, large tanks on their backs, were plugged into steel frames in their arms that spewed flames, target sighted. Came a muffled voice from the man in front as he raised his gun to Kiba's face. The young blonde widened his eyes in shock as he moved backwards, tripping over as a bullet flew past from someone in the back, hitting the container that his brother was in. "Check your aim. Do not hit the containment tube." The glass cracked and that long crack from the bullet spread out like a spiderweb, covering the entire front as Naruto's eyes snapped open, a chilling icy blue that seemed to glow even in the brightly lit room. The armored men froze in place. This 16-year-old scared them to death. Even the scientists that worked with him every day didn't understand what he was. The tubes in his back disconnected and bubbles quickly filled the tank, blocking the view of Naruto. "He's awake. Fire. Bullets and flames filled the room, and Kiba crouched over trying to make himself as small as possible. Though he didn't feel anything, he would at the least expect it to be hot, even if everything was missing him, yet there was nothing. Pulling the hands away from his head he looked up and saw a large silver shield blocking everything away from him. "I won't forgive anyone that tries to harm my family," came a cold voice across the ruckus of the room. Kiba widened his eyes in shock, only to feel a hand land on his shoulder in a comforting manner. He turned to see Naruto standing there. His scar over his heart still remained, those strange marks on his face, along with his toned body, that showed he used to work hard and would no doubt return to doing such things. His other hand extended out, opening with a flat palm. The shield that had been protecting them extended in width and height before large spikes came out of the front and it surged forward, crushing the enemies through into the hull behind them, running them over and clearing a path as a second one formed in front of Naruto, who grabbed onto the handle and fixed it onto his arm. Naruto spared a glance at his younger sibling, his face was full of questions. I have a sacred gear, it just took me a lot longer to unlock it than you did, Kiba. Naruto patted Kiba lightly on the back before stepping forward and blocking a large barrage of bullets that flew at them. You should stay close. I plan on pushing them all out the front door. Kiba nodded and stepped into his older brother's shadow. He felt so much better now that Naruto was here, even if he had more questions that still needed to be answered. When their parents passed away, Naruto stood up and looked after them until he started to fall ill, which led them to this place. This hell. He wondered what kind of sickness it could have been for Naruto to have been in that test tube for so long, but now he seemed to be fine, as if nothing had happened. He was back to being Kiba's guiding light. His hair was a little longer, which was to be expected seeing as he unable to move for months. It now came down to the middle of his back in a rough-looking mane. Kiba held back a small chuckle as he ran behind his brother. He wondered how all these grown men felt being tossed to the side by a teen in his underwear. Embarrassed, shocked and full of shame hopefully. They quickly came to the main hall. The stench that filled the air was heavy. Naruto tossed his shield forward and blocked the only entrance other than the one they just came through up. Well, it would protect them. It was also sealing the foul smell inside with them. Naruto didn't need to look around to know what it was. God damn it, it's freezing. Naruto whined loudly as his bare feet padded around on the tiles below him. We'll keep moving soon. I just need to get some clothes before I freeze myself to death outside. Can you keep an eye out for me, Kiba? Oh, okay, I can do that. Kiba gave a small nod as he summoned a small dagger and held it in the ready as his eyes scanned the room. His breath seemed to be stuck in his throat as he continued to look, making sure that nothing was able to sneak up on them while Naruto was busy. A couple of minutes passed and the elder blonde came back. He was in a pair of ripped jeans, a tight black muscle shirt, and what seemed like it was once one of the black shirts that the older males were wearing torn and draped around his neck and shoulders as a muffler or scarf if you will. He pulled it down a little and gave a warm smile to Kiba. Let's keep moving, brother, can you make me a sword? Kiba gave him a questioning glance before slowly nodded and making a strong steel blade for his older brother, only to see a shield hovering in front of him. He took it without question as he handed the blade to Naruto, who gave it a few swings. Feels just like the one I used to use at home. I used to use it when you were studying, I'm sore. Don't worry about it, Kiba, it's natural for people to get curious, right? Naruto gave a small shrug as he fastened the shield on his arm. It was sturdy. The large shield that was blocking the door was blown off from where it had been secured and flew straight at the brothers. Kiba stiffened as Naruto stepped forward, his blade glowing ever so slightly as he let out a slash at the coming shield, splitting it in half and letting the metal go flying either side of the two, his icy eyes staring in the direction from where the attack came. Standing there was an older male, possibly in his 30s, his hands having a strange glow of light. A smile was stretched across his face as he gently pushed his glasses up his nose. My, we seem to have a few kiddies out past their bedtime. Allow me to tuck you both in. Naruto gave a small smirk as he twirled the blade around in his hand. Sorry, but I don't swing that way. I mean, I know what some of you priests are like, and I prefer not to treat the holy snake. I can defang it, though if you want. You stupid little fuck, what the hell do you think you're doing screwing around like this? Naruto, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to say, the Kiba murmured softly, an uneasy look on his face. The blonde in question though gave a small chuckle. What are you talking about? Naruto pointed his blade at the man and gave a warm smile, though it didn't reach his eyes, they were cold, never leaving the man. I mean, I guess you're right, priests like it better from younger boys, it would mean more if it came from you, Kiba. Kiba paled and shrunk a little behind Naruto, never noticing how Naruto changed his stance to block Kiba off completely from the man. Naruto clicked his tongue lightly and took a small step forward. The priest clenched his fists tightly, the edges of his lips twitching up ever so lightly, as if he was taunting Naruto. The elder blonde took a step forward and heard the door on the other side of the room swing open, the path from which they had come from, the area that Naruto had pushed everyone out of, yet somehow someone came out of there. From his back sprouted a pair of pure black feathered wings. Now that was something different, the feeling he gave off was chilling. He grit his teeth, shifting himself and Kiba backwards, positioning them in a way that had the two of them in Naruto's line of sight at the same time. The strange winged man let a smirk crawl across his face. These two are different, gear holders, the older one is pretty sharp too, not to mention his eyes. The one with wings is a fallen angel Naruto. He, father wasn't happy with what they did, so he banished them, ripping the feeling of peace and safety from their bodies. Careful though, they can be dangerous. Naruto gave a small nod to the voice inside of him, tightening his fist slightly around the blade in his hand as he felt a strange energy swirl inside of him like a raging maelstrom. He flicked it around lightly, an arc of energy trailing behind the cold steel as he swapped it to a reverse grip before flying forward with a sprint. the likes of which caused the Fallen to widen his eyes slightly before summoning a spear and using it to block the spinning strike of Naruto, which would have gutted him on the spot. Ah, he doesn't hold back, not an ounce of hesitation. Father, why don't you deal with the other naughty child? The Fallen questioned and the priest moved to make good on the request, only to be cut off as a sharp shield nearly took of his head. Sorry, but I am a bit of a glutton, Naruto remarked with a smile of steel. I think I will be dealing with both of you, otherwise I couldn't quite live with myself. Oh, I like you, boy, though I think you may have bitten off a bit more than you can handle. The angel stepped forward, pushing Naruto back and shattering the blade in his hand, causing him to curse. With his shield gone, he had nothing to protect himself with, thus he jumped back, dodging the spear ever so slightly and watching it tear through his top. Landing on his feet with a small slit, Naruto let out a small groan. I just stole this shirt too. Inwardly though he was sweating, that was way too close for comfort. Alpha, can we make something strong enough to fight against that spear? Ah, well, maybe. Your shield should stop the spear, though with your body right now I don't know. The orb hummed slightly as if it was thinking, why didn't I think of that? Picture a spear forming, just like the Fallen had. Naruto pursed his lips slightly. Okay, but when this fails, give me something new. He stretched his fingers out, feeling the strange energy move, as if he was controlling it before forming a spear, just like the one in front of him. Alpha, I think we are going to need to have a talk after this. Naruto, less talking, more fighting. The Fallen stood with a brow risen high. Well, aren't you something, a human that can control light? I really like you, boy. Sorry, the feeling isn't mutual. Naruto spoke in a sing-song voice before dashing forward again, forming another shield on his arm as he did and pushing the Fallen spear to the side before he thrust his own forward, only to feel something push his strike out to the side. It was a second spear. Okay, I feel like calling cheating on you now. The Fallen saw how Naruto's eye kept going to where the priest was every few seconds as they held that position before he lifted his foot and planted it into the blonde's chest, sending him flying backwards. Call me a cheater if you want, but I feel like you deserve some credit. If you want to protect that other child so much, go for it. I won't fight you until you finish dealing with the priest. Naruto pursed his lips slightly. The Fallen seemed to be the bigger threat, that much was certain to him right now. He was fast, probably even more so than Naruto, as the blonde hardly saw him move before he was able to block. Father, do I have your word that you won't move from that spot until I finish my fight here? This caught the others by surprise, but the Fallen merely widened his smile. Oh? Was my offer not good enough for you? Sorry, but I am not exactly going to trust someone who fucked up and was kicked out of heaven because of it. Fallen angel. Naruto gave a slight nod of his head as a second spear formed in his left hand, the straps of the shield pinning it tight to his arm now to give him the ability to dual wield. And here I thought that you children were not taught about the supernatural. The Fallen trailed before shrugging his shoulders lightly. Very well, father, do not move from your position until I finish killing this one. If you do, I will kill you myself. You understood? Naruto Kiba trailed, looking at his older brother. Naruto crossed his spear over one another and gave a smirk to the Fallen in front of him. Now you have my full attention. He dashed forward again, watching as the Fallen lightly tossed his spear and angling his shield for the spear to bounce off of it as he moved. Quickly closing the distance, he stabbed forward with his spear. Meeting the sound of it striking another before doing the same with his other and hearing the same sound. The Fallen had created another in the time it had taken for Naruto to close the distance. Without taking time to think, Naruto ducked down, letting go of the spear on his shield arm and barging forward before striking the Fallen with the point on the end of his shield, ignoring the blood that spluttered onto his face and the look of shock on the man in front of him. You little brat. The Fallen retorted as his wings flared before firing a barrage of feathers at Naruto and exploding. Kiba watched as the fire engulfed his brother in shock. Naruto, to see him taken down so easily was just. His thoughts were cut when a spear shot out of the fire and struck the angel in the chest as Naruto jumped back, his feet sliding across the floor as blood poured out of his chest. The thin metal slowly worked its way over his body, seemingly sealing up the holes he had acquired. Along with the burns, his hand was extended outwards in the direction of the spear. Then, with a seemingly large amount of force working against him, he stretched his hand into an open palm, causing the spear to explode, just like he had moments earlier due to the feathers. I can't believe that worked. Yeah, we are going to be having a nice long talk after this, Alpha. Naruto spoke aloud, causing confusion to cross Kiba's face, along with a large amount of relief. Naruto reached down and touched his stomach. He was going to grip it tightly to see how bad the pain was, but Alpha had already covered his injuries with metal and started repairing his internal ones with his light ass, the floating orb called it. His training and his mind may have very well have saved him there, having been able to create a very thin shield in front of his body to take the majority of the blow before it erupted. Even still, it had done a large amount of damage to him. He grit his teeth watching as the cloud of smoke lifted, showing a battered and bruised Fallen angel glaring daggers at him. You are actually starting to piss me the fuck off, brat. The ouch way, don't make me laugh, you dick. though it serves you right for looking down on us." Naruto took a small step back and summoned up 2 spears again, a third one appearing moments later in his mouth. He spared a glance to Kiba, seeing his younger brother fumble the blade in his hand lightly. He had to try his hardest not to shake his head. Why the hell did he have to fumble at that moment? He made it look as if he couldn't protect himself. Now Naruto would subconsciously worry about him, even if he knew better. Naruto slashed at the spear that came towards him, creating a concave shield in front of its flight path to block the blast if it did explode. Without pause he moved forward, blocking another spear and repeating the process before getting close enough that he could stab his right spear into the ground and take the one out from his mouth and use it. Another appearing a moment later in his mouth again as he twirled and stabbed them into the ground again and again around the fallen, before skidding along the ground under his feet and planting 2 small spears made of light into them, pinning him to the ground. Without waiting he moved away and stretched his hands out, causing a massive explosion, the force of which would be amplified on the fallen in the middle of it as it came from all directions. Again Naruto had to wait for the cloud to settle, only to find that the fallen was well and truly dead. He was not recovering from that. He let out a pant as he struggled to try to catch his breath. There was a loud crack, and Naruto's eyes shot out wide as something entered his body. He looked down and saw blood leaking out of a hole where his heart should be. With wide eyes he turned to the priest in shock. In his hand was a gun pointed at Naruto and a deranged smile on his face. Biba's mind froze. Naruto had won. Without any shadow of a doubt his brother bested a fallen angel, whatever the hell that was, yet the priest shot him. He grit his teeth and ran forward, his dagger in hand, as he let out a roar of emotional pain. He just couldn't understand why things had to happen like this. He blocked the gunshot with his shield that Naruto had given him before he approached and slapped the man in the side with it, though because of his lack of strength it did next to nothing. Shaking his head in frustration, he thrust his dagger forward, feeling it puncture flesh, and his stomach churn at the thought of what he had just done, before pulling it out and stabbing him again. And again and again. Even as the priest started to fall to the ground, Kiba didn't stop. He let his instincts take over and just needed to make sure the man paid for what he did. There was a loud crunch and the body seemed to fall limp. Snapping his head around, Kiba turned to look at his older brother, watching him struggle to sit up. He looked up to Kiba and gave a warm smile before his eyes widened and his hand shot out forming a shield behind his brother, mere moments before a thundering impact was heard. Kiba slowly turned and from the corner of his eye he saw the priest on the other side of the shield, a sword of light in his shaking hands. "You should have just let us kill you both, it would have made this so much easier on everyone." Naruto let out a small chuckle before wincing as he stood, taking a small stride forward and stumbling a little before he dragged his feet, feeling his blood leak out with each step, though he was able to close the distance. The priest tried to pull his hand away, finding out that the task appeared to be impossible. He was locked in place, the shield had extended metal tendrils of a sort to bind his arm to it, keeping him from moving. He peered around the shield and saw the blonde standing there, blood seeping from both his chest and his mouth as his shoulders hung down along with one of his limp arms. His left was stretched outward, pointing towards the priest as light formed on its tips. "Oi, I know you pricks have a thing for stabbing little boys with your swords, but get the fuck away from my little brother." 5 thin beams of light shot from his fingertips and struck the priest, flinging him against a far wall before turning his body to ash, his screams following the actions the entire time. The cough racked the body of Naruto, sending him to his knees as blood splattered on the floor in front of him. "Naruto!" Kiba exclaimed, quickly rushing to his side and holding onto him tightly. The elder blonde though rubbed his younger brother's head lightly. "Well, I guess I got to come back in an explosive way, eh, Kiba?" Said child went to respond only to feel the hand on his head stop and the body in his arm slump fully. Kiba clutched Naruto tighter, holding him close, turning his head ever so lightly as he heard the sound of steps coming. Without a second thought he summoned a blade into his hand and turned to face where it was coming from. His eyes narrowed as he took in the red-haired girl before him. "Leave me alone. Sorry, but I want to give you and your brother a new lease on life." Kiba widened his eyes at her words, looking down at the form of his brother before meeting her seafoam gaze. "What's your name?" "Rias Gremory." Naruto let out a groan as he sat up, which was strange. He didn't think that he would feel tired or pain once he was dead, yet here he was, feeling both of those. His eyes slowly opened and he came face to face with a pair of near pink eyes and long silky black hair that framed what happened to be a very cute face. Ara, you should rest a while longer. You were quite injured when you were brought here." "Ah, to have someone like you looking after me, I must be in heaven," he teased lightly, one of his eyes checking the bandages wrapped tightly around his body. It was quite clear, at least to him, that he was more than likely still alive. "Actually, we are in the underworld." His face paled slightly at her words. Okay, maybe he was not alive still. He gave her a curious glance. "I have a feeling that I am either missing a few pieces of information or when they call alcohol the devil's juice, they really aren't joking." The cute girl lifted her hand up to cover her mouth before giving a light chuckle. We should wait for my master to return before delving too much deeper into this conversation. Naruto gave a small nod, searching himself inwardly and externally. Alpha, if things turn sour, how would we go right now? He paused, waiting for the reply. Naruto, it is good that you are up. We are not in good shape, though in saying that, we are also in the best shape we have ever been. The blonde rose a brow at that. Okay, slow down and explain Alpha. It is simple, your dormant powers from your father have started to awaken. Wait, what are you talking about? Naruto-san. Akeno questioned. The boy that was previously stuck in what seemed to be a deep thought suddenly spoke, though it didn't seem like it was directed at you. Naruto held up his hand and narrowed his eyes on her. Can't you see that I'm in the middle of something here? I will just sit here then, carry on, Akeno mumbled out, her eyes more than a little wide, as the blonde gave a sharp nod and glared at a piece of lint on the bed. If looks could kill, that lint had traveled to the sun by this point. As I was saying, Naruto, and do listen this time, you're a child of light. Why don't you believe me? Fine, picture wings on your back, just do it, come on, why won't you do it? Naruto rubbed at his temples. This was a headache coming, he already knew it. Focusing on his shoulders, he felt a strange energy build up, almost like a burning sensation before it finally broke, like a wrecking ball tumbling through a wall. He was, in fact, forced to lean forward a little as it burst from his shoulders. He felt the bed under him shatter and saw the cute girl jump back and glide through the air as she landed on the other side of the room. Her eyes were wide, so much so that they looked as if they could burst from her head at any moment. Before her was a pair of large devil wings, that much she had expected, well, not quite yet, but once he knew what had happened, she figured he would try to call them forth. It was what rested underneath them, two feathered wings, as white as snow, resting directly below his devil ones. She bit the inside of her lip as the door slammed open with Rias leading the group. Kaneko and the new knight, Kibayudo, the younger brother of the one in the bed currently, were flanking her. Akeno, what's going on? I felt a large amount of angelic-ine. The words died in her mouth as she looked at Naruto. That is not what I was expecting. Nai-san? Kiba questioned in hesitation. His voice seemed to draw the older blonde back to reality. His blue eyes had a light glow to them as he turned to face Kiba. Hey there little bro, just a moment. Naruto extended his hand out as a glowing blue orb formed before becoming ethereal and floated away as it moved to circle around Naruto. Yo, did it work, Alpha? Indeed it did, Naruto. The orb paused and seemed to spin on the spot slowly before stopping again. We are surrounded by weird people, Naruto. It happens a lot, you'll get used to it, Alpha. Oh yeah, Kiba, this is Alpha, my sacred gear. Naruto gave a small wave of his hand at the orb, who shot over to the younger sibling. Don't worry too much about that, in fact it is better if you just pretend that he isn't floating around you and talk to him like he was standing in front of you, otherwise you'll just give yourself a headache. Nai-san, I believe there are some things that we need to explain to you. Kiba gave a slight bow of his head, creasing his brow lightly as Alpha moved with him, like a planet in orbit, and his head was a star. After his bow and light observation, he waved his hand dramatically in the direction of the red-haired girl, who had previously burst into the room to start speaking to someone named Akeno. Naruto figured it to be the cute girl from earlier, though he wasn't sure. Maybe the girl was deciding to call him Akeno. That would be pretty weird. This is Rias Gremory, though given where we will be heading, it may be best to get used to saying it Gremory Rias. Okay, so you found yourself a girlfriend or something, Kiba? Naruto gave a confused look before Alpha darted back to his head and started his orbit. Quite the opposite, the young lady here is not a lady at all, she is a devil. Naruto quirked a brow slightly, like horns and fire and stuff, yeah. Yes. Okay, so the devil is a small teenage girl, I guess I can live with that. No, you two are now a devil. It is not singular but rather RAC. Naruto nodded his head lightly. I guess that makes sense. I mean, you said that prick back in the church was a fallen angel. That would mean that angels are real, meaning that Lucifer falling from heaven and becoming a devil may not actually be just a fairy tale. He pressed his lips together in thought, but I thought that those that served under Lucifer were demons, not devils. That is another story for another time anyway. The devil there is your new master, so to say. Alpha stopped his orbit and slowly spun to look at Rias while he rested beside Naruto's ear. Everyone in this room is a devil, though there are also two children of light here. Akeno, at least that is what Naruto was going to call her until told otherwise, tightened her features as she glared at the blonde and his floating orb. What the hell is this child of light stuff you keep talking about, Alpha? The orb paused and bobbed a few times. You're an angel, so is the girl with pink eyes, though she is FALLEN like the one you killed in the CHURCH. Naruto pressed his lips together as he looked at the dubbed Akeno. Okay, he gave a small shrug before looking back at Alpha. So anything else I need to know about? We are, and by that I mean you, are now a rook from the game of chess. You have increased physical and magical defense with a major boost to your physical and spiritual attacks. Magical attacks remain the same, though our endurance has been raised. Alpha bobbed up and down before circling around Naruto's head again. Why? I think you are taking this pretty well, Alpha, Naruto trailed tiredly. Well, I am more open-minded now that we are together, well, not together, but together, you know. I do not. Naruto rubbed at his temples again, sparing a glance to Kiba. This is what I went through every day I was in that tube. I am so sorry, Naruto. Nah, it's not that bad. You do get used to it after a while, but it can still get a bit irritating from time to time, so we are all devils. That's pretty cool, I guess, though what would Mum say now? No doubt she would blame it on television. Naruto scratched his chin a little before shrugging his shoulders, which caused his wings to flap and knock everyone over. I forgot about them, Alpha. How do I draw them back inside? Just focus on them going back inside. It should work well. There was a small bob, I hope, or we will suddenly burst into flames. Either way. God damn it, Alpha. The others flinched like they were struck by something, which caused Naruto to give them a ludicrous look. What the hell are you guys doing? Talking about God or anything heaven related normally ends up in us being struck. Why aren't you? Rias spoke for the first time since she entered the room, though that was from Naruto's perspective. She may have indeed been talking, but he was more preoccupied with the floating orb and Kiba. That is because Naruto is an angel, Alpha explained of so simply. Not a fallen one, he added after a moment of thought, which caused a small growl from the other side of the room. Rias blinked a few times before looking at the orb. You're a sacred gear, correct? Yes, Alpha replied after a moment of thought. I didn't think that sacred gears outside of the Longinus were sentient. Alpha paused in his movements. We were not made to be god slayers. Sacred gears are to fuel the evolution of the races. Naruto rose a brow at the serious tone that Alpha had taken, while the others in the room gave a confused look. I am Alpha, the first, or the hands of God. Together with God, we have created all known sacred gears in rotation. The pin drop could be heard in the room as the devils stared in awe. Naruto scratched at the back of his head before lightly bopping the orb on the head. Despite its somewhat see-through nature, you need to calm down a little there. But it's true, and God chose you to be the next wielder of me long ago. He has plans for us. Naruto craned his eyebrow at that. Whatever they are, I don't care. I want to live my life my way. He shot a glance to Rias. Do you have a problem with that, master? Naruto gave a tired sigh as she rubbed the bridge of her nose. My family doesn't work like that. We treat our servants, and I use that word very lightly, mind you, with respect. I actually consider most of my peerage to be my friends. Inwardly though, she was jumping up and down at what she had heard. The first sacred gear to get her hands on that, the one responsible for aiding in the creation of all the others, she just may be able to defeat the unbeatable Phoenix. His words though were something that rang through her a little. He wanted to be who he wanted, not what others expected him to be. That was something she could respect, feeling that they may be able to use that small shared belief to form a connection. Not to mention he was an angel, or at least partly, one that was able to stay to his roots despite being changed into a devil, at least if his wings were telling the truth. That was unheard of, a major rare piece. Mixing that with the Alpha as it seemed to be called, she may have hit the jackpot with these brothers. Her lips pressed together slightly, seeing him toss her words around in his head. Would he believe the truth, or would he take it as a convenient lie? She watched him stretch his arms up and reach behind his head, giving a small shrug. Whatever, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You can't be worse than the last people that took us in after all. Rias saw Kiba wince from his words. She had, after all, had a very brief, overview of what the brothers went through before she found them. Along with watching the Elder One tap into light and start using it almost naturally in the same battle against a fallen angel with no doubt much more experience with the magic than him, and coming out on top. So I'm a rook, that's the castle, right? Naruto questioned, causing Rias to blink a handful of times at him before noticing that she was being addressed. Yes. Though you are a mutated rook, meaning that you are worth more than the standing 5 points of a rook, Rias answered, letting a small breath out. She had actually forgotten about that, with the amount of things that had been discovered about the blonde. He was a once-in-a-lifetime piece. Naruto rolled his hand around a few times, letting bright lights flicker over it like rolling coins. He noticed that Rias had her gaze trained on the coins. Is there a problem? No, it is just that light energy, which you are currently using, can be quite dangerous to devils, which just so happen to fill this room currently, Rias explained calmly, though she was interested in how he seemed to control it naturally now. If she hadn't seen it herself, she wouldn't have been able to tell that he had only recently awoken his angelic side. He spread his fingers out wide, stretching the coin like a rubber band around his tips before quickly rolling his hand and closing his fingers shut, causing it to vanish like it had never been there. Well, what are we waiting for? No offense really, but I don't like people in the room where I was sleeping, it feels kinda strange. I mean, well, last time I was asleep, well. Rias widened her eyes for a moment before quickly nodding. I didn't think of that, sorry Naruto-san. Ain't no big I guess Rias-san, so let's get out of here now. Kiba adjusted the shirt on his shoulders, making sure that the white fabric was properly in place before he smoothed out the slacks he was wearing. It was the clothing he felt the most comfortable inside of, it was simple, yet it had just enough flair to make himself stand out. They were of course provided by the Gremory house, he wasn't quite sure what to make of them yet, they seemed nice enough, though in this world, nice normally was not enough. He spared a glance to Naruto, who was currently playing with the hood on his new jacket. He was in a pair of dark gray jeans, a tight white t-shirt covering his chest barely being exposed to the outside world by his large black jacket with an orange fur-lined hood. It was fake fur, at least Kiba believed so. Naruto pulled his hands away from his hood and ran one through his hair to calm himself, though he wasn't really bothered by anything, it was more over the fact that he had done so much since his test tube broke and he hadn't really stopped. After his conversation with Rias in that bedroom, they met the people that lived in the mansion, along with Grafia, the head maid of the house, after a small glare war, along with Naruto, having to explain how he broke a bed by drawing his wings out, which he still wasn't quite sure how that happened, she had given them money to fetch clothes for themselves. This was the outcome. Naruto clapped Kiba on the shoulder and pushed him towards where the girls were no doubt waiting. It turned out that Akeno, yes he made sure that it was actually her name, and Rias were both in their first years of high school in Japan. It would turn out that Rias stumbled by them during her vacation with Akeno and Kaneko. Kaneko was a year younger than Kiba. This of course made Akeno and Rias a year younger than himself, it would be his second year if he was in high school in Japan, that was if Alpha's information was still good, though the floating orb hadn't steered him wrong before. In saying that though, Naruto was 16, going on 17, while Akeno and Rias were either turning 16 or were already such. Stepping out into the main area of the store, he saw the attendant widen her eyes in shock at the two young males, before her cheeks gained a light dusting of rose. Rias let a smile creep onto her face, while Akeno slightly lessened the permanent glare she held on Naruto. After all, he came right out and said that she was a fallen angel. Well, his sacred gear said it, he just didn't seem to care, which wasn't right, how could he not care about something like that? What was he planning to do with that information? Blackmail? She honestly didn't know. Though she could admit that he did look good. Naruto crouched down and looked at little Kaneko, who was giving him a blank look. So pipsqueak, how do we look? It's Kaneko. She turned her gaze away, looking outside of the store and giving off the impression that she wasn't going to reply. Look cool, she softly stated, causing Naruto to give a smug smile. Well, if Pipsqueak says we looks good, it must be true, must be because we were gifted with our mother's amazing good looks, Kiba. The younger brother merely gave a nervous chuckle, he couldn't remember their mother all that well, to be honest, it was kind of a blank point in his life, he couldn't remember his father either. To him it was mostly just Naruto that he could remember and all the things that he has done for him. Naruto gave a small shrug of his shoulders, well Red, are you going to keep ogling me all day, or can we go get something done? Rias had a small blush form on her cheeks before she cleared her throat, it was indeed true that she had been looking at his well-toned chest that stuck out below his tight t-shirt, though she wouldn't say that loud, I believe we sh. Though her words were cut off, which actually shocked her greatly considering who did so. Uzumaki-san, can we speak in private? Eyes turned to Akeno, after all she had referred to him, which was strange in itself. Her voice was also slightly gritted, though it was more the fact that she had remembered a line that he had spoken on their way here, even if it was quiet, she seemed to hear it and remember clearly. His mother was called Uzumaki Kushina, he seemed to hold a strong connection to his mother, so it would after all make sense for him to prefer to use her name, that along with the fact that apparently he didn't have a father. Naruto placed his hands inside of his pockets and let out a small sigh, sure, I guess Red and the others will catch up to us. But that the two angels walked out of the store, leaving Rias to pay for the shopping trip, by that we mean Lord Gremory pay for the trip, because after all Rias didn't walk away with nothing from all this, she needed to pick up the new season's change of style. She spared a glance to the direction where the two left, her mind wandering on what that conversation could be. Once they were outside, Naruto gave a curious glance to Akeno, so what do you want to talk about? He looked down as she grabbed onto his hand and dragged him down a nearby alleyway, I guess I'll just follow you then. He offered, though Akeno didn't reply until they came to the back of the store they were inside of, and she put him up against the wall, trying her hardest to look intimidating as she glared at him. What are you doing? Akeno hissed out. Naruto though rose a brow at her, I guess I am being held up against a wall by some cute little devil girl. Her eyes narrowed on him dangerously. Look, I have no idea what you are talking about. It wasn't your secret to tell. Yep, I am missing something here. I didn't want anyone other than Rias to know about that side of me, Akeno growled out, clutching his shirt tighter, that I have such dirty blood. She was taken back though when the blonde just laughed at her, intertwining his fingers with her own and breaking them away from his shirt. Who cares what you have in your body? She widened her eyes and looked to the blonde. I mean, I am an angel or something, right? Akeno nodded at his words, slowly, but she nodded nonetheless. Yet so far, I like you devils the most. I mean, yeah, you have the blood of a fallen, and one of you guys tried to kill me and my brother, but he wasn't you, so why should I care if you have fallen blood or not? To me and Kiba, you haven't done anything wrong other than glare at me non-stop since we left the room today. She saw that their hands were still linked together and felt a rush of heat to her cheeks before she took her hand back, placing it behind her as she tried to fight the blush that was rushing to her cheeks. Then. Akeno, are you done yet? Came a call from the front of the store. Naruto gave a small chuckle. It would be pretty cool if you could stop making those faces at me. Then again, we don't know each other. Screw it. Red will probs get angry if we leave her alone for too long. He took a few steps back towards the front before looking over his shoulder. You coming? Yes, sure, the young teen stuttered out, still able to feel the touch of his warm hand against her own, his words as well. He was so different to others. His mind seemed to be much more open than she thought it would be, especially considering the fact that he had already been attacked by a fallen. If anything, he seemed to have a decent enough reason to be somewhat hostile towards her, yet. He wasn't. Maybe he wouldn't judge her like the others seemed to. Maybe things could be a little different this time. No. On. It's not happening. But Naruto, everybody else is doing it. Brad, I refuse. Nai-san. Not happening, Kiba, just no. Rias and her peerage sat around a room, spread out on lounges in the apartment that Naruto had managed to acquire from Surzich's in a game of poker. They didn't want to really pry into how Lucifer lost hundreds of thousands to a newly reborn devil in a game of luck and skill, but they all knew it happened. Rias, Akeno, Kiba and Kaneko sat across from Naruto on a long lounge that was a deep ebon in color, while Naruto sat in a resting chair. Between them was an older-styled table where their refreshment sat. Red, or Rias Gremory, was currently pouting. Akeno was straining to keep a smile on her face, while Kiba looked plain exhausted. Kaneko was currently happily nibbling on a stick of Pocky. She rose a brow in Naruto's direction. Go to school, she stated calmly. Yes, the entire argument that had been going on for nearly half an hour now had to deal with the eldest blonde going to high school, not you two, Chibi. Kaneko gave him a stoic glare for his use of her new nickname. There was a flash of light and a blue orb appeared next to Naruto, hovering in the air for a moment before starting to orbit Naruto. But don't we need to go to school to accomplish your dream? Naruto. Alpha's words seemed to gain the interest of everyone else, much to the blonde's displeasure as he sunk a little in his chair. Oh, does our angel have a dream he wants to accomplish? Akeno taunted him lightly. She was willing to give him a chance, not much more than that, but he seemed to be good in the sense that he didn't judge right away. But silly, I don't want to talk about it. He wants to be a hero. A loud thud rung out through the room as Naruto's head found its way to the table between the two sides. Really? Rias questioned, quite surprised. A hero? Naruto let out a tired sigh. There are times when you need to stop talking, Alpha. But you never told me not to say it. I never told you to come out, yet you did. Naruto trailed before picking himself up and looking across to Rias. This world is crap and bleak, in all honesty it is fucked, and it looks like no one is trying to do anything to fix it. We are all too busy fighting against one another in this world where heroes no longer exist. I want to create new ones that people can hold on to. To think fondly about when the times get tough and maybe even give life lessons to those in need. For this, I want to be an author, a hero that creates heroes. A pin drop could be heard in the room as people were giving shocked looks to the blonde. He was surprisingly deep, much more than they had thought, plus from what they had seen he was well versed in literature, along with being quite intelligent. It was a possibility for him. Rias slowly let her eyes return to normal as she gave a small smile to the blonde across from her. Going to school would be helpful for that dream. What don't you like about school that makes you so against the idea? The rest of his words were mumbled. Pardon, what was that? Rias questioned, a little hopeful as the blonde hung his head down. I've never been to school before. Kiba paused in shock. Thinking back, Naruto was right. He was always working so that Kiba could attend, and then he became sick. Nai-san. Something wasn't adding up, and Akeno was the one that decided to question it. If that is the case, how do you know so much? Naruto jabbed his thumb out in the direction of Alpha, who was now hovering around the table, trying to put a straw inside of himself to drink tea. Believe it or not, despite his looks and the stupid things that he often does, Alpha is incredibly smart. He taught me most of what I know regarding my schooling. Easy task, children of light learn much faster than any other race. Don't you think you're being a little biased, Alpha? Rias questioned. After all, this ancient sacred gear, though they seem to often wish he lost the ability to talk, was created by God, much like the angels, or children of light, were. Probability low, am basing my conclusion on facts. Children of light are able to take in and process information faster than the other races by 30 to 50%. It is one of the many reasons they are so dangerous in combat. Well, the minimal time that you can all gather your reaction time to is 0.21 seconds, at least currently. A child of light can bring that down to 0.1 when their body reaches its maximum possible POWER, Alpha responded calmly. The sacred gear did enjoy every chance he got to tell Rias that angels were better than devils, and he took every chance he got to do so. Rias crinkled her brow slightly. That doesn't sound all that impressive, she trailed lightly. Naruto though looked like he was able to answer a question that had long since escaped him. Is that how I was able to match that fallen when I just woke up? Correct, it is nice of you to put that together so quickly. You were simply able to react faster than him as the battle continued. At first you were quite slow in doing so, mostly because you were still in the process of waking up after a long period of rest, but once fully alert it was quite easy for you to see what he was doing. Correct. Yeah, I could see what was happening, but my body was still pretty slow. I guess I need to really increase my speed if I want to be able to fight against people like that. He saw the look that Rias was giving him and chuckled. Do you honestly expect me to believe that I am not going to have to fight people now that I am protecting an heiress to one of the great devil pillars? Red. Rias pressed her lips together in thought. I see you are more aware of your surroundings and the proceedings that happen around you than you let on. Very well, how about we make a compromise, Naruto? I wish for you to attend Kuo Academy so that you can be closer to myself and the rest of the peerage. I could speak to my father and see about having you enrolled into a self-study course. You will need to report your progress to the board of directors every now and again, but you will be mostly able to do what you wish. I can accept that, Naruto mused, picking up his cup of coffee and placing the damn straw inside of Alpha to stop a gear from giving him another headache, begrudgingly that is. A smile weaved across Ria's face. This had been an argument she didn't want to have with a blonde, though in the end it had turned out quite well. She learned more about her new rook and managed to convince him to come to the same school. Though he wouldn't be in their classes, though that was to be expected anyway, he was older than them, though it would be nice to have an attractive-looking senior around. She gingerly picked up a teacup that was placed on the table for her and sipped at the contents, her eyes going wide at the taste. Naruto noticed this and gave a light chuckle. I figured you might like that. I ordered that tea in from India, as Akeno said it was your favorite drink. Naruto waved his hand lightly and spared a glance to Akeno, who indeed looked quite surprised. What? Did you honestly think that I just didn't listen to all that nagging you tend to do? Quite honestly, yes, Akeno quipped, earning a dry glare from Naruto. A tired sigh rung through the large empty room. In the library of Kuo Academy, in between a large pile of book resting either side of him, with another resting on his face, his feet kicked up while he leaned back on the hind legs of the chair. He had spent the better part of a week brushing up all of his literature skills. But the abilities of Alpha, he had found it all too easy to read through the large amounts of information. Now he was bored, he needed a topic. For some reason he thought one would just drop out of the sky and land in his lap. He awoke with a jolt as something struck the table across from him. The only reason he didn't fall from his chair was due to his quick reflexes, allowing him to grab the table and pull himself back into place, his other hand grabbing the book from midair and placing it back on the table, glaring across at the smiling raven-haired woman across from him. You shouldn't mess with your seniors like that, Akeno, he trailed out. Oh my, I have no idea what you could possibly be talking about, Naruto-senpai. I was just placing my books down so that I could study more effectively. Her smile didn't falter in the slightest, and that is what irked him the most. Naruto stretched his arms out and gave a tired sigh as he sat properly, stealing a glance at the book she placed down. And you just needed to use the library for this studying of yours. You know, the only one place that I would possibly be during school time. Indeed, this is the only place I can get reliable information on the English language. The fact that you just happen to be here alone is just a coincidence, Akeno replied, her smile stretching a few fractions further. The blonde gave a small yawn at which he tapped his mouth a few times before scratching his chin. Well, congrats, because of language, you just had a conversation in English. The fact that you didn't know shows just how scary that ability is though. Akeno rose a brow at him, but that can only happen if someone else is you can speak English. She practically shot out of her seat and stared at the man. Latin, Spanish, French, Romanian, English, Japanese, Chinese, Greek and Italian. I have spent quite a bit of time with a wealth of information, so I did all I could to learn what might be useful in the future. Kinda seems pointless. Now that we have this perk of ours. Naruto rolled his hand across the table and let out another sigh. I guess I'm gonna head into town. Maybe pick something up to eat on the way home. He stood up to leave, only to hear the chair across from him squeak out in a movement as well. Is there something that you wanted, Akeno? See, can I get your help with English? I can speak it fine when it comes into a conversation, but I cannot read or write it. She looked at the blonde, only to see him continue to get up. Inwardly she sunk a little. No one had really been able to connect with him. He seemed to shut them out, even Kiba to a degree, but A always would help his little brother without question. Well, are you coming? A voice questioned from the door. Looking up she saw Naruto standing there with a questioning look. But my boo. Leave Naruto waved a light hand at her. You can stare at books all day and try to pound it into you that way, or you can learn it while you are out and about. Do you really think I spent so much time seated in a test tube doing nothing but learning things from Alpha? I mean, he didn't teach me about being a special child, but he taught me how to use his powers. I trained with him every day while he was teaching me about the world. Akeno looked at her books for a moment before placing them into her bag and moving to stand next to Naruto. He closed the door behind them and led the way down the halls. This though had started people talking. The library used to be full of students, though now no one tried to go there. The girls, while they believed the collage student to be incredibly attractive, they also seemed to think of him as something like a sleeping dragon. He was best to be left alone and admired from a distance. So when they saw one of the great one Isamas walking by his side with her hands tucked behind her back seemingly in a good mood, they didn't know what to think. There were a handful of boys, mostly from proud families, though they all resided in the first year and were honestly beyond scared of the blonde, calling someone a Yankee, only to have them rip through you in perfect Latin, in front of a group of teachers who actually clapped at his performance was enough to leave some marks. Naruto let out a small sigh as he ran a hand through his hair. This is ruining my image. Akeno let a smile spread across her lips. Being seen with a beautiful girl is going to ruin your image. I would hate to know what you think your image is, senpai. Her words earned her a small glare which she shrugged off. This kind of back and forth continued as they passed through the shopping district. Apparently Surzichas had lost much more money to Naruto than they had thought. That was if the amounts he was spending was anything to go by. It didn't really seem like Naruto was doing much to teach her. She hadn't even noticed he was doing it, though at the end of the day he gave her a piece of paper written in English and got her to read it without her even struggling once. She gave him a confused look which he shrugged off. When she went back to her books later that night, she found it made so much more sense. Sitting on her bed, she twirled the pen around in her fingers, musing over the book in her hands, only to be disturbed by a knock at her door. Now living all alone in an old run-down shrine had very few benefits. One of those though was that she was mostly left alone. Meaning it was one of the devils that she attended school with. Jumping off her bed she walked through the old shrine and came to the large door, creaking it open just enough to see a distraught Rias standing in front of her. But oh, what brings you all the way out here? Her response was for Rias to lift up her workbook. Sticking out of the side was the assignment sheet that Akeno herself had just completed earlier. Have you finished already? Please tell me you have. Rias asked almost desperately. Akeno though gave a light giggle. Ara, did Butcho lose track of time watching and reading her collection again? Rias gave her a small glare at the way she said collection, making it sound like her large collection of anime and manga were dirty. It wasn't her fault that she found them so entertaining and addictive. Possibly she trailed, already knowing that Akeno had convinced herself that this is what happened, so lying about it wouldn't help her out in any way. I have finished, yes. Akeno trailed carefully, wondering where Rias was trying to go here. Then could I possibly look over your work and make sure that I haven't done anything wrong? You mean you want to copy my assignment? The one that asks us to individually work on translating a menu and giving an accurate description of a Japanese-themed restaurant in English. Akeno tapped her bottom lip a few times. The assignment was due tomorrow. No, you can't copy mine. She saw Rias give her a look of pure shock. Though I can help you if that isn't enough, I suppose you could always call Naruto. He was the one that helped me, though I still don't know how, but after spending the afternoon with him this subject is much easier now. Rias gave Akeno a confused look. Naruto knows English. He knows quite a lot, plus he has spent the majority of the week in the library just reading, as much as he could. Akeno watched as Rias went to grab her phone before sighing. I don't have his number, and I kind of don't want to show up unannounced. Last time was strange. Last time? Oh my, what happened? Rias fumbled the pages in front of her lightly as they walked down the lonely halls of the abandoned shrine. She didn't know why Akeno decided to live here, though she appeared to be happy with it. Maybe it was because it reminded her of home somewhat. Either way, she thought back to her longtime friend's question and blushed deeply. I may have made a mistake and teleported into his bathroom while he was on the toilet. A small blush formed on Akeno's cheeks as she let out another giggle. Ara. Naruto rubbed at the back of his head as a yawn passed by his lips. So red does everyone have to do this kind of thing? The reason for his question was somewhat simple. Rias had asked him to take care of a stray devil by himself. That was the oddity, at least for the rest of the peerage, though they had been told to just go along with her words for the time. It was the reason why Kiba was not present, he had protested against having to lie to his brother, so Rias told him to wait in the club room, indeed. It shouldn't be much of a stretch for you though, should it? There was a loud pop as Naruto put his back into place and stretched out his arms. I am still majorly out of shape, but it is only a stray devil, not even a high-ranking one. I can do this easily. Rias gained a small smile at that, though she did not like playing her peerage like this, she needed to know how strong Naruto was so she could put him to better use in her strategies. This stray devil was once a mid-class devil that rebelled against her master and managed to escape to the human world. Her power now was quite strong, more than Akeno or herself would be able to handle in a straight fight. If they got the drop, then it would more than likely be no issue, as they could cause a large amount of damage, leaning the battle into their favor. In saying that though, Rias had contacted her older brother in regards to her new rook. Turning an angel into a devil had never happened before with allowing them to keep their wings. Normally they would either revert to a human if the cause was just, or become a fallen if they did so out of a sinful reason. Her rook was one of a kind, and that was not wasted on her. No one could tell what his potential was. That was without the added fact that he held the first sacred gear, a sentient machine, her energy. They weren't sure on the mater yet, which held the ability to at the very least aid in the construction of sacred gears, alongside the biblical god, was nothing short of amazing. Not to mention there seemed to be some investment in her rook from the Heaven faction, at least if the words of Alpha rung true. God chose you to be the next wielder of me long ago. He has plans for us. God had an interest in her rook, the man that created everything and could quite easily take everything, wanted a rook for something. It must be important, that also had to mean that he was different from any other human. Well, that much was clear to her already. He was part angel, a strong one at that, from the light that poured off of him when he released his wings. It had sent shivers right down her spine. This was the reason why her getting him to do this task was so important. She needed to know if she could deal with Naruto, if he became a problem for her in the future. Holding out her hand, a small anime-styled bat came into play. Its body was much too big for its wings, yet that didn't seem to be an issue for the small creature. I hope you do not mind letting my familiar watch over you. Don't have much of a choice, but whatever. Naruto gave a small shrug before turning on his feet. The bat familiar following closely behind him as he entered the large concrete tunnel and vanished into the darkness. His target was further inside, using this old maintenance system as a hideout for the time being. Once he was out of earshot, Akeno turned to Rias, the smile that was on her face dropping. This is much more than you should be giving someone to do alone. No, you wouldn't have even taken this request when it was just myself, you and Kaneko. Are you worried about him, Akeno? Rias mused. It was actually strange to see her queen show an interest in anything really. Normally she was detached from her surroundings, there, but not really there. I am worried about you, Rias. You're changing. It hasn't been all that long since Kiba and Naruto joined us. Kiba has accepted us and acts as somewhat of a medium between us all. I just fear that you may be putting a wedge between yourself and your rook, Akeno answered, though that wasn't the real reason. She would miss the playful banter between Naruto and herself if something were to happen to him. He didn't treat her like she was different. Some avoided her because of her fallen statues, or even because of her title as Great One Isama. Others tried to wrap her up in bubble wrap to protect her. Naruto, well, he was blunt, straight to the point. If you irritated him he would say it. He talked to her normally. Sure, he omitted the fact that she was a fallen angel from their conversations, though they didn't talk all that much about the supernatural. It was more just about how school was, how his book was going and small things like that. If anything, she would have to admit she had taken a liking to their interactions. Passing him in the hall and seeing him flash that small grin of his made her day seem a little brighter, or even receiving his deadpan glares when she teased him, warmed her normally cold chest. So no, the reason was not for Rias, not fully at least, but it was okay for her to be selfish, wasn't it? Weren't devils meant to be greedy? To act on their desires? If so, wasn't she only doing what was natural? Thank you for worrying, but I am fine, Akeno. I just need to see where he is at. I do not believe him capable of losing to a creature like this, Rias spoke with a small smile. But that irritated Akeno to no end, though she let a smile slowly stretch across her face. How could Rias possibly know what Naruto's level was like? She had openly admitted that she didn't even know that Naruto had fought against a fallen until he had mentioned it. All she had really seen was Naruto seemingly raise himself from the dead to protect his younger brother, which in turn caused her to bring them both back after finding that Kiba held a sacred gear, as did his older brother. All of Ria's information came from Kiba, and Akeno could not picture the smiling young blonde actually giving her anything really worthwhile. No, she figured that Naruto didn't even let Kiba know how strong he was so that the boy wouldn't feel conflicted. She pressed her lips together and tried her best to hold her smile firm, though something would need to be done. There was a rift forming in the peerage, and as its queen, it was her job to fix it. You know she is lying to us, Right? Naruto pressed his lips together in thought, checking behind him on the familiar, making sure that it was still there just in case. I know. Kiba would have been jumping up and down on the couch trying to tell me about something like this. That boy really just wants to prove himself. When you look at how you were both raised, well, that isn't really the right word now, is it? The frown crossed Naruto's face. Alpha wasn't wrong, yet he wasn't right at the same time. Kiba and himself had been alone for nearly longer than they had anyone but each other. That's wrong, we raised ourselves. The path opened up into a wide room. Using the corners of his eyes, Naruto scouted it fully, taking in everything he could, watching as a black-robed figure slowly rose to its feet. It was only a matter of time, I guess. Slowly the figure turned to face Naruto. It was a girl, young-looking in appearance with faded red markings on her face, her eyes a deep blood red. Stray devil it came. A borderline S-class criminal, your piece was the knight, giving you increased speed. This matched with your sacred gear wounding edge, which causes your attacks to leave wounds until you either release your sacred gear or you die. The young-looking girl widened her eyes a little at him. You looked into me. My master, I guess she is using this as a test of my strength. The familiar of hers behind me watching over and possibly recording the situation for her is more than enough to tell me that I am right. That, along with the fact that the only reason I know who you are is because of the markings on your face and your deep eyes, well, you could say that I was expected to walk into this situation blind. Naruto gave a small shrug of his shoulders. The Kame gave a sad smile and looked at Naruto. There is no chance I can ask you to just walk away, is there? Naruto thumbed at the familiar next to his shoulder. Not a chance, sorry. Though you do seem too sweet to have killed your master out of a shallow reason, I would ask, but this already has a sour taste in my mouth. Forgive me then, Akeno said as the ground exploded out around her and she appeared in front of Naruto, her sword already raised to strike. She watched with slight awe as he dodged the strike. It should have been impossible for him to respond so well from the position he was in unless he started to move as soon as she did. It was only just able to class as a dodge as she watched a blade pass so close to his skin that she would have been able to claim giving him a light shave. She went to change her direction only for her blade by strike against metal before being thrown off to the side. She took a split second to get her bearings and stance back. Standing across from the blonde and seeing the metal gauntlet on his left hand. I was going to say the same thing. Sorry to ask this, but do you think I can take my jacket off first? I really like it so I don't want it to get damaged. Hell, if you beat me you should take it, I reckon it would look pretty good on a cutie like you. Naruto saw the faint tint come to her cheeks as she gave him a forced stoic nod. Once the jacket left his body and was placed inside of a metal ball that appeared from the blonde's hand, Akeno took in the state of the blonde's body. He was a fighter, the muscles were there, slim yet strong, not overly bulky, meaning that they didn't get in the way of his attacks. You're not like the others. Apparently I am one of a kind, though that isn't important. Naruto flickered from her view for a moment, appearing again not far from his position, lightly bouncing on the balls of his feet, another gauntlet now present, along with a pair of boots that looked to be made of a sturdy and hardened material, meaning it would be difficult to cut unless she hit his shins directly. Giving the normal movements of the legs though, that was awkward. A glancing hit was much more normal, though those boots would more than likely protect him from one. The arms were another thing entirely though. They were much more likely to take a direct hit, meaning that it made more sense for them to be heavily armored like they were. Akeno drew her blade up to her eyes and took a strong and low stance. Her skin started to darken as the light markings gray much brighter and more definite against her skin. I am sorry, but I won't hold back any longer. Akeno dashed forward and thrust her sword out, watching as the blonde curled around it and landed a fist into her stomach. She could feel the strong force behind it, though no pain came from the impact. She was forced to lean over and cough, spittle flying out of her mouth, though it didn't hurt at all. Her eyes widened as she felt a sudden impact to her ribs, sending her flying across the room. She managed to flip herself over in the air and see one of his legs still extended from where he had kicked her. It felt like a strong push, though with the force she was sent, it had to have been an incredible kick. Akeno stabbed her blade into the ground, halting her movement right away as she looked down at where had been struck. The clothing had been completely destroyed. Feeling a creeping embarrassment surge inside of her, she looked at the blonde with a blush adorning her cheeks. Sorry about that, but I don't want to hurt you. Because of this I am using weapons that numb the areas that they hit, though it also destroys any barrier between them and the skin underneath. Naruto opened and closed one of his armored fists, an awkward expression on his face as he did. Akeno nodded. You really are different, she stated that so clearly that Naruto widened his eyes at her before letting a smile cross his face. Yeah, I guess I am. He drew his power into his shoulders and let it burst out behind him, the ground around him exploding under the newfound pressure. Akeno took a small step back at the sight of his wings, the devil ones she had expected. It was the ones of pure white that caught her off guard. Then again, he had been nothing but nice to her, even as they were fighting to the death he was trying to make it as painless as possible for her. Slowly she formed a smile and showed it to him. Maybe if we had met earlier in life, we could have been friends. May I have your name? It's Naruto. Fishcake or Maelstrom? She questioned further, showing that she had some knowledge of Japanese names. Naruto let his own smile roll across his face. I sometimes wonder that myself. He gave a small flap of his wings and craned his head to the side. If you are giving it your all, I should do the same. Became white in her eyes as he vanished in a burst of speed, her body only just able to turn to her left in time and bring up her blade to defend against the metal fist that appeared on the edge of her vision. The force behind his fist was incredible, though she knew that if it hit her, she wouldn't hurt anymore, it would take away her pain, this pain that made her who she was, that reminded her of why she ended up living this way. She was torn, feeling the crushing weight before she was lifted off the ground in by his other arm. She tried to turn, to see from which direction he was coming, but he was too fast, his punches spinning her and lifting her higher and higher with each strike. It was a brutal onslaught, though at the moment they felt like nothing but friendly taps. How much damage had he done to her body now? Could she even stand? Her back hit something hard and solid. Looking over her shoulder she saw the ceiling and felt a small pit rise in her stomach. It was well off the ground, so much so that from ground level, it was blacked out by the lack of light in the area. Akane felt her body start to fall down to the ground, only for it to stop as a warmth surrounded her, stopping her fall before she could strike the solid ground below her. Naruto had caught her and was lowering her to the ground. She looked at the blonde in light confusion, feeling herself get laid out on the ground. She attempted to swing her sword, only for nothing to happen. Turning her head ever so lightly she could see that her arms were beyond destroyed, yet she couldn't feel a thing. It didn't hurt anymore, nothing did. Tears slowly started to spill from her eyes as she gave a wide smile to the blonde standing over her. Thank you Naruto, for making it go away. Naruto dispelled his gauntlets and twirled his fingers around, drawing a pristine-looking silver dagger from the air. I hope you can meet with your sister again Akane. Her eyes widened at his words, you knew. I have a little brother myself, and between you and me, I would have done the same thing. I couldn't hate you for the actions you took. No, in fact I think I admire you a little, something akin to a hero. Do you think that it might be okay if I share your tale with humans in the form of a book? He questioned. He had in fact been researching her before this all happened. To him she was a hero and he hated himself and Rias for what they were doing to her. Akane gave him a smile. Of course, I don't think it would sell very well though. Naruto returned her smile and rested his dagger against her chest, watching as it slowly rose and fell. You should rest now Akane, you've already done more than enough. His response was a small nod to which he plunged the dagger inside, watching as she gave a confused look to him before she fell still. Her body slowly vanishing up into the air, leaving behind Naruto who twirled the dagger around in his hand before it broke apart completely, sending itself into the air much like Akane's body had, the small particles of energy swirling and intertwining as they faded away into the darkness above him. Spinning on his feet he locked eyes with the small bat, who quickly stiffened under his gaze. You're recording this aren't you? The tone from Naruto was icy, the familiar quickly nodded with its strange body head in response, not wanting to end up like the girl had just moments before. Tell Red. Rias was watching the recording with wide eyes. Naruto had far exceeded what she had expected him to do, that was even before he brought his wings out. After that the borderline S rank didn't stand a chance. It was completely one-sided. If she were less composed, she may be drooling at the prospect of having such a strong piece under her command. That was until he turned his gaze onto her familiar. Tell Red I want everything available on the Akane case, also I don't want to see her for a while. This has left a foul taste in my mouth, and I don't think I would be able to hold back how I feel. Her high had dropped in an instant, now serving as a reminder of how cold the ground could really be. She had not believed herself to be making a mistake, thus she called for the information on Akane and looked through the first couple of pages, her hand stiffening on the paper as her skin turned pale. Because of how close Naruto had been to her, Ria's familiar hadn't been able to pick up their conversation, but it appeared that Akane had become a stray. After failing to protect her sister, she was driven to the point of insanity and murdered her king and peerage in cold blood. She wondered if it was pure chance that this had come her way or if it was just a warning for Ria's future. She had taken the brothers in to use them for her own gain, much like Akane's king had. If something happened to Kiba, would she face a situation where she would be on the receiving end of Naruto's fury? Rias let out a sigh. If she could hit the blonde with her power of destruction, then the fight would be over. But he was fast, much faster than her power of destruction could move, not to mention he could create shields to block her power for a few moments to buy himself more time. This situation was not looking good for her. I don't think I would be able to hold back how I feel. Rias looked up at the recording being played again, seeing Akeno looking at the screen through eyes of uncertainty. Akeno went to speak, only for Rias to cut her off. I don't need to hear that. I can see when I have made a mistake Akeno. Rias pressed her fingers to her temples and gave them a light massage. I was offering to attempt to smooth things over, Akeno sighed out, letting go of the familiar in her hands and letting to fly back to Rias. Iridid looked to her queen in confusion, he said he doesn't want to see us for a while. No, just you Rias, Akeno let out a small sigh, you're the only one that he has an issue with. It may be because you haven't tried to actually talk to him. You just expect him to follow your orders. I think that you forget that you never asked him if he wanted to come back. Kiba is the one that asked you to bring him back. Naruto had no say in becoming a devil, yet he doesn't ever say that aloud because it might hurt Kiba. I believe that Naruto cares more about Kiba than his own life. Ria slumped down and rested her head against the clubroom desk. I didn't want for this to happen, I just wanted to see how strong he was. I couldn't think of another way to actually see him in action. He trains Kiba often in swordplay. Recently it would seem that he has started doing some hand-to-hand sparring with Kaneko as well. Akeno crossed her arms under her bust. Either way, I do plan on seeing Naruto at some point over the next few days. Would you like me to give him the files on Akame? Her response was for Rias to nod her head against the desk. Could you ask him to see me when he thinks he is ready? Akeno rose a brow at her king. I will see, but first it would be best to ask if I could come over. She pulled out her phone and quickly found his number. It was saved under Dove Boy, then again it was done out of spite for the fact that she was Raven in his phone. She brought it up to her ear and heard the tone dial before it was picked up instantly. Hello? She questioned. Oh great, why did it have to be Alpha that answered? Hello full in one. Really? He is still calling me that. Hello Alpha, though I would prefer if you called me Akeno. She forced a smile onto her face. She had heard once that people can hear if you are smiling or not over the phone. Understood error full in one. What can I help you with? Akeno blinked wondering if she had just heard correctly before shaking her head. I was wondering if Naruto was accepting company tonight. Naruto is accepting those that are not called red. Are you called red full in one? Out of the corner of her eye, Akeno saw and heard Ria's groan as she sunk further into her desk. Much more, and she might fuse with it completely. Was that possible? If so, it would make for an interesting study. Maybe she could do that as part of her science course to earn extra marks. I am not. Red refers to Rias, at least I am quite sure that is the case. That would make sense. Thank you for clearing that up Fallen One. Have you eaten yet, or would you like for us to prepare something for you? If it is not an intrusion, I would not be opposed to having dinner with you and Naruto. Akeno gave a slight nod as she picked up the files from Ria's desk and started to walk towards the door, flashing a smile to her king, who gave either a wave or a half-hearted flip of the finger. To be honest, she wasn't sure at the moment. I should be around in half an hour or so. I would like to change first. Understood. I shall inform Naruto so that he can prepare. Kiba should also be home around that time. Akeno nodded. Thank you, I will see you soon then Alpha. Yes, you two full in one. Akeno smoothed her top down. She had decided to wear something much less formal, a simple long-sleeved sweater and a pair of jeans. It would keep the slight chill in the air away from her, while also helping to hide her rather generous chest. She was well aware that it drew more than normal amounts of attention towards her. Reaching up, she knocked at the door, waiting as she heard footsteps on the other side. It didn't take long for it to open, leaving Kiba standing there with a confused look on his face. Akeno-senpai. Is there anything I can do for you? Akeno blinked a few times, taking in the much more casual look of Kiba. He was in a pair of tracksuit pants and a long-sleeved sweater-like shirt. It was incredibly strange to see the normal formal-looking boy so not normal. Ara, seeing you like this Kiba-san, what would the others think of you? The younger blonde narrowed his eyes a little. No offense Akeno-senpai, but I am not really in the mood to trade barbs with you today. Seeing the direction this was heading, Akeno rose her hands in a placating manner. Naruto, or rather Alpha, said that it was okay if I came over, plus I brought something that Naruto asked for. Kiba watched as she pulled out a folder that seemed like it was ready to burst open of its covers. On the front had the name Akame. Seeing Kiba's eyes widen slightly, she figured it wasn't the first time he had heard the name. The younger blonde opened the door a little more. Come in then. Nai-san is in his study, I'll let him know you are here. Alpha already told me, came a voice from behind Kiba. Both him and Akeno turned around to see the older blonde standing further in. Akeno had to stop the blush that rose to her face. It would seem that the older blonde had gone with jeans and a tight t-shirt, showing off the work he put into his body, though she wondered when he did. Because mostly she either found him sleeping in the library or out shopping. Dinner's nearly done, no doubt you've already checked, but it's that slow roast that mum taught me. Kiba gave a small blush and rubbed the back of his head, having been read so easily by his brother. Well, I may have had a peek. Anyway, get inside and close the door, you're letting the warm air out. Naruto waved them both inside and entered the living room himself, where tea and coffee had already been prepared with Alpha hovering back to the kitchen. Naruto picked up his cup of coffee and walked into the kitchen, pulling the roast out and quickly carving it up. Akeno found herself lost in the smell, it was warm and inviting. Nothing like how the shrine she lived at felt. She fumbled her fingers as she sat down on the lounge next to Kiba. There was no sound coming from the kitchen, though she could see Naruto working with a strange level of intensity. Kiba seemed to pick up on her confusion. Nai-san likes to keep things rather quiet around here. It allows us to focus on our studies better. To be honest, when the club was over was the loudest it has ever been apart from family movie night, of course. Family movie night? Akeno questioned. She hadn't heard of something like that before. Kiba scratched at the side of his face. Nai-san goes out and buys some rather terrible movies, and we sit down with desserts and watch and talk. It is pretty silly, but it is nice. Akeno tried to picture something like that, but couldn't find the idea of Naruto sitting down and just watching a movie with Kiba within her mind. Then again, it seemed like it was special to Kiba, possibly because he was the only one that saw that side of his brother, their own special kind of bond. She sipped lightly at the tea and was surprised by the taste it left in her mouth. It seemed that Naruto had once again spared no expense with the tea. "Potatoes?" came a question from the kitchen. "Hi Nai-san," Kiba replied without a second thought. Akeno paused on the question a little. How long had it been since she last had a potato? "If it is no trouble," she offered. Was it just her or was the house getting warmer? The sound of plates sliding across the counter snapped her out of her inner thoughts, and she looked up to see Naruto putting stuff in the sink and leaving them to soak while they would be eating. "Dinner's up," Naruto called and Alpha came zooming through the apartment. He was more than likely in Naruto's study prior to the call. Akeno and Kiba moved up to the bench and found what looked like a feast waiting for them on their plates. Large amounts of meat, cheese, gravy, potatoes, a small side of rice, along with what seemed to be some loose salad that would complement it. Akeno found it strange. She looked up to Naruto and saw an even stranger sight. He had a goofy smile on his face. "I may not be the best cook, but I like to think I can do a pretty good job when it counts." Kiba nodded as he took up a stool. Eating out the counter was something that was done in this apartment. It made Naruto's job easier, plus they didn't really have room for a table. While Naruto had spent the money from Surzich's to get a nice place, it was not over the top. It was a place where 2 to 3 people could live easily. Having bought it outright, he didn't have to worry about rent, mainly just the bills, but they didn't use too much, leaving a lot left over for Naruto to spend on food and materials for the brothers. Nai-san's cooking is amazing, Akeno-senpai. He is just trying to be modest. Incredible. That was the only word Akeno had to describe the meal she had just eaten. The conversation was light throughout the meal, mostly just Naruto teasing Kiba about the following of girls he had at school, and Kiba of course retorting saying if he didn't seem so standoffish he would have the same. Akeno had mostly stayed out of it. Though she did bring up that Naruto apparently had an image he wanted to maintain, which earned her a small glare. Now she remained seated at the counter as Kiba went to his room to finish his homework. Being a Friday night, he had decided to get it all out of the way before the weekend truly set in. He was a good kid like that. This left Akeno and Naruto alone in the kitchen. She watched as he quickly scrubbed the dishes before placing them on a rack to drip dry. He turned around, wiping his hands with a washcloth as he did. Alpha had floated off to go do whatever it was that he did when he wasn't with Naruto. "So what brings you here?" Akeno quirked a brow at him. "I have the files of the Akame case that you wanted." Naruto pursed his lips together in thought and gave a slow nod. "To be honest, Akeno, I am quite tired of playing these games with Red and her group, just be honest. Red could have sent a familiar over with those, there was no reason for you to come personally." The raven-haired woman hung her head a little. "I chose to do this, I just want to say that firstly." Rias is important to me, and while I may disagree with the course of action she has tried to take with you, I can see her reasoning behind such actions. We cannot ask you to trust us if we do not trust you first. I cannot tell you her reasoning, but she is in a tight spot at the moment, and we need people like yourself and Kiba. She wanted to test your strength. Well, she went about it in a roundabout way. She got the result she wanted. Just the final outcome was not something she had planned. Akeno was about to place her head against the counter only for a cup of tea to be placed in front of her. "It isn't poisoned if that's what you're thinking." Naruto offered her a small smile. "Besides, Red would know right away. Her familiars are not doubt watching this place again." "Does this happen often?" Akeno questioned. The look she got from Naruto was the only answer she needed. Sighing, she sipped lightly at the tea. "Well, it seems like she has decided to stay away for now, though she has asked to speak to you when you think you're ready." Naruto gave a small scoff. "When I think I'm ready." "Akeno, let me be frank with you, I didn't ask for this shit. Alpha says he could have healed me, even if Red didn't come along, myself, and Kiba would have been fine without her intervention. To be honest, the only one that seems to have gained anything out of this is Red. I am more than ready to talk to her when she starts to see me as a person and not some tool to meet her goal. Because right now, it feels like that is all I am to her. She says that she treats her peerage members as family. I don't see that." Akeno didn't even try to hide the frown on her face. "Is that how you really feel?" You don't want to know how I really feel, let's just leave it at that, shall we? He lifted up a cup of coffee and sipped at it lightly before peering over to the cloak on the wall. It is getting late, your parents must be. Whoa, he stopped himself when he saw the sad look cross her face. Sorry, do you want me to walk you home? Then no, it's fine, I will show myself out. I left the case file on your coffee table. With that she gave a light bow and walked out the door, pausing as she stepped outside to see one of Ria's familiars sitting on a nearby rooftop watching the house. Shaking her head from side to side, she nearly ran down the steps. Rias was playing a very dangerous game. Akeno could see that already. Naruto was on the edge at the moment, he could go either way, and she felt that Kiba would be dragged along with him. They were closer than she had thought, much closer. They acted like siblings. They were an actual family, not some pretend one. Brushing a few strands of hair behind her ear, she reached the bottom of the stairs before starting the long walk home. She wanted to be able to blame his toxic words on Alpha, though she knew that it wasn't the truth. Naruto had every right to be as angry as he was, if not more so. She knew all too well that Rias could not defeat Naruto. He was simply too fast for her. Not to mention Rias had never actually been struck before. The first time would more than likely break her focus completely, allowing him to completely destroy any defense she had put in place. Currently, the best way to describe the situation was a kitten poking a sleeping tiger. It was only a matter of time before the kitten poked a little too hard and the tiger woke up, and she knew very well who the kitten was in this case. Her lips were pursed in the dimly lit room of the old school building. Her fingers intertwined in front of her mouth. Her eyes were cast down to the book in front of her, having just finished watching a show that had a rook presenting his kind smile to the people asking him questions. A portion of her wondered how they were able to get him up at this time, though she figured the Kiba more than likely helped. Another part, though, was depressed. It had only been 3 months since the happening with Akame, yet the blonde's book was already in circulation. It was selling incredibly well, so much so that Naruto had paid back most of the money he had won off of Surziches. The act thoroughly confusing Surziches, who never expected to see any of the large amount of money again. Rias Gremory let out a tired sigh as she continued to look at the book. She had not seen Naruto, at least not in person, since she asked him to go after Akame. Her fingers lightly trailed the cover of the book before she opened it up, seeing a small inscription on the inside from who she assumed to be Naruto. I read, yes, it was definitely Naruto. You've been a bitch, and I sure as hell haven't been perfect either anyway. My number is at the bottom. Call me and we can meet up or something. Read, maybe we can start over and give this an actual try. She frowned and thought, had she really not had Naruto's number before now? Pulling out her phone, she quickly went through her contacts, only to find out she had never bothered to form a way of contacting him. She just relayed her messages through Akeno or Kiba when they had been on more speaking terms. The book in front of her had actually been sitting on her desk for a couple of days now, her sense of procrastination stopping her from opening it, mainly due to the fact that she believed it would be such a hassle to deal with, nor did she believe that a message would be there for her to reply to. Biting her lower lip, she hastily entered the number. Akeno was out, as was Kaneko, and Kiba was more than likely training. She had seen that the boy was down lately, and after asking it turned out that Naruto had refused to spar against him until he became stronger, not wanting to injure his little brother too much, so they should be completely alone. With his number now entered, she took a breath in, steadying herself before calling him. It rung and rung and rung. She figured he must not be near his phone and was about to give up until he answered. He didn't speak for a moment, and Rias could hear the sound of loud music. I was wondering when you would call. Red. Rias felt her body relax slightly when she heard his voice. For some reason she had panicked slightly when he didn't answer her right away, though her mind drifted to the loud music. Is now a bad time, Naruto? Not really, I mean I am out, but I can talk if you want. Red. There was a small pause. Also Akeno says hello. Akeno is with you? Yeah, didn't she tell you that she was going to a party tonight? Naruto replied as if it was common knowledge. Rias frowned as she twirled a few strands of hair around her finger, thinking back on her best friend's words. I was invited out tonight, I don't want to let them down, so is it okay if I go? Rias? She hadn't thought much of it then, though it was a little strange for Akeno to ask something of her, though to find it was Naruto that invited her out was news to her. Perhaps they got along much better than she thought. She did, though she never told me where it was is all. Makes sense, I guess. The list was pretty tight, though the inside is lame as, hey, what are you up to? Red. His word sounded strange to Rias, though it seemed something else came up. Sorry, someone is calling me. Here, talk to Akeno. The sound of the phone being passed around was heard for a few seconds before a soft giggle sounded out. Hello, Rias. Akeno, are you okay? Something didn't sound right with her best friend, causing a bit of worry to seep into Ria's voice. Fine, I'm fine. Rias, I don't know how Naruto thinks this is lame. I'm having so much fun. Akeno, where are you? A bit of desperation ended up in her voice this time as Rias held the phone a little tighter. Rias, I'm fine, I am out with Naruto at a party and everyone is so friendly. No, Naruto said I shouldn't drink anymore. Akeno groggily spoke to someone that was near her. Rias clenched her phone a little tighter, hearing it crack lightly under the strain, and then remembering that she needed to keep it in one piece to keep talking to Akeno. Are you drunk? She ordered her friend. I have been drinking, yes. Akeno paused slightly. I wasn't meant to tell you that. This was Naruto's idea, wasn't it? Rias questioned through clenched teeth. How dare he get her friend drunk? She was underage. Wait, wasn't he underage as well? Nope, well I mean he was planning on having a couple of drinks with his friends tonight, but then they all saw him on TV today and wanted to have a party. It got pretty big really quickly. Akeno seemed to be thinking something over. Oh look, Naruto's back. The sound of a phone being fumbled around filled her ears again and caused Ria's brow to twitch. You there still, Red? Uzumaki. Naruto, what made you think that giving Akeno something to drink was the right thing to do? She kept her temper level-headed, at least she believed that she did. She wanted to try it out. I gave her a couple and have been watching her since she started to get a little tipsy. Nothing to worry about, Red. I won't let her get hurt. She is a pretty nice chick once you get to know her after all, Naruto reasoned, and Rias was sure she could hear him shrug in his voice. Tempering her emotions down, Rias let out a small breath. Trust is a two-way street. Trust is a two-way street. She repeated that over and over again in her head. Can we meet up tomorrow then? Sure I guess. You want to do breakfast? The others say I cook a pretty mean breakfast. Very well, I shall be over at around 10 AM then. I would ask that you look after Akeno for me tonight. You don't need to ask that, Red. I look out for my friends. The line went dead and Rias looked at her phone. It was getting close to midnight. Well, that was a lie. It was still a little over an hour away, though it would not do her well to be waking up late. This may be her chance to try to mend her quite broken relationship with her rook. That was exactly what she asked for. Looking over at the small stack of paperwork she had finished earlier, Rias gave a warm smile. She definitely deserved to watch some anime before bed. From memory she had set Bleach up to record earlier. That would do nicely. With good thoughts in mind, Rias nearly skipped out of the old school building, her destination home. Naruto snapped his phone shut with a flick of his wrist. Akeno was not too far from him, dancing with a group of girls on the floor that was quickly changing color to the rapid beat of the music. She seemed to be really enjoying herself. A bunch of guys from the university portion of Kuo were clapping him on the shoulder. They had somehow gotten the idea that the two of them were dating. Though that may have to do with the amount of time Akeno had spent holding onto his arm to try and steady herself tonight. He stuffed his phone back into his jacket and took the cigarette from his mouth, placing it into a nearby ashtray. He found it relaxing when the stress built up a little too high or people wanted just a little too much. Though he found that when he was drinking. Akeno was in a short black dress with thin straps over her shoulders. It had a deep cut in the back that showed off quite a bit of her perfect and taunting skin. She had a pair of small heels on that matched her dress with little sparkly studs in them. Naruto had taken her shopping earlier, and apparently that was what she wanted to wear tonight. Naruto was clad in his jacket and jeans combo that had almost become what people expected to see him in. He walked forward and the girls around Akeno quickly parted with knowing smirks on their faces, as if they were giving him permission to lay his moves on the girl. Akeno noticed that her friends had moved away and gave a confused glance, only to notice the white jacket in front of her face. She gave a wide smile and looked up at the owner, Naruto-kun. She cheered lightly and wrapped her arms around his neck. Akeno was a very happy drunk. We have to look at going home soon, Akeno. Confusion quickly filled her young face. Huh? Why? I am going to speaking to Red in the morning, plus I'm not leaving you alone in a place like this, he added. I'll buy you a drink for the walk home, but after that you're done for the night, okay? Akeno pouted at him but let out a small sigh. So bossy, she thought about protesting when he grabbed her hand. For the briefest of possible moments, that was the protesting, of course. Though he stayed true to his word and led her to the bar where he picked her up what he called lolly water and some furry fire flask, or triple F for short. He had explained it to her earlier, and from what she could remember, it had something to do with being a yakai drink that was incredibly potent, something that was served in only a handful of clubs and was quite expensive. The bartender, seeing the state Akeno was in, decided to put her drink into a water bottle for the girl, one with those pop tops. Naruto just gave a light chuckle as Akeno thought the bartender was calling her a baby, though she did take the bottle and start playing with it as soon as it entered her hands. But that the duo left, stepping out onto the cold street, which caused Akeno to shiver. Of course the girl hadn't brought a jacket with her. Inwardly sighing, Naruto undid his and draped it over her shoulders, earning a small look of confusion. I don't want you to catch a cold. She wanted to retort that she was fine, but seeing that look of care in his eyes stopped her. He was genuinely worried for her health, thus she nodded and leaned into the blonde as he walked her down the street. Taking in the smell of smoke, alcohol and his cologne that had latched onto the jacket. It was a strange scent, but it filled her with a large amount of warmth. Her head looked up as she heard the click of a metal lighter locking into place, watching as his cracked lips curled ever so slightly around the butt of the cigarette, his eyes seemingly scanning everything around them, like he was looking out for anything that could be trouble. He breathed out a thick cloud of smoke, and Akeno stood up on the tips of her toes. Naruto-kun. He turned towards her to question her only to have her lips press against his, cutting off any talk that may have come from him. It didn't go any further than that, they just stood there in the middle of the pathway, late at night, her wind blowing lightly in the breeze as ash from his cigarette was carried away with it. A few more seconds passed, and Akeno pulled back with a wide smile on her face. I had a lot of fun tonight. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. He paused, eyeing her for a moment. Her eyes were slightly glassy, a giddy smile was on her face as she lowered herself back to the ground, grabbing onto his arm and proceeding to play with the bottle by constantly opening and closing the lid. Yeah, come on, let's get you home. I don't want to go home tonight. Akeno protested, looking up at Naruto with a pout on her face, watching as he sighed. There is a guest room at mine you can use if you want. He offered, seeing her brighten at the mention. He then remembered, Akeno didn't have anyone waiting for her, no parents, no siblings, she would be truly alone if she went home. Well, maybe Rias would pop over to check on her, but otherwise she would be alone. So of course the idea of going home did not seem appealing to her. Akeno pulled on Naruto's hood which she was wearing and caused it to shadow her eyes. The fur inside the hood, acting to keep her much warmer than before, matched with the fact that it was longer than the dress she had worn out tonight, made her look incredibly cute. Plus I need to stay so that you don't eat Rias. Why the hell would I eat red? Naruto questioned, a slight shake of his head following the words at the ludicrous thought of such an act. Pause, the kitten keeps touching the lion's paws, Akeno sung out, as if it answered every problem that existed in the world. Yes, sure, Naruto muttered out, taking a drag from his cigarette and blowing the cloud out in front of him. His left arm securely in place with his hand resting in his pocket while Akeno held onto it like a pillar that was supporting her life. I am giving her a chance here. Thank you, Akeno whispered, her voice nearly muffled by the wind that blew down the street, though Naruto heard her. I really want you two to get along. Oi, stop that, don't make me feel bad about fighting with her, that isn't fair. The rest of the walk was made in relative peace, neither really having much to say. It didn't take them that much longer to reach Naruto's apartment. He fumbled around in his pockets for a moment before pulling out his keys and unlocking the door. The lights were already on, and it seemed that Kiba had fallen asleep on the couch. His clothing was still a messy. Meaning that he more than likely dropped as soon as he made it home from his training. The sigh escaped Naruto's mouth as he turned to face Akeno. I'll put him to bed, you just wait here a moment. Akeno nodded at his words and started to play with her bottle again. It was still half full, and her goal was to finish it before falling asleep. She watched as Naruto walked up to Kiba and picked the boy up like he weighed nothing before vanishing down the hall for a while. A couple of minutes passed by, and Akeno was about to go check if everything was alright before she saw Naruto coming back, now in a pair of cotton tracksuit pants and a tank top. He was rubbing the back of his head as he let out a tired yawn. Do you want something to eat before bed? He saw that Akeno was struggling to come up with an answer, so he just went ahead and made them some instant ramen. It was pretty good, not as good as homemade or that stand down the street, but it was still ramen, so it was up there in the charts. The reason for Akeno struggling to find an answer was not due to the fact that she didn't know if she wanted something to eat or not, it was due to the fact that she could see the large arms of Naruto outside of his normal shirt. Not to mention the tribal marking on his right arm. When did he get a tattoo? That was something she should know about, after all she spent quite a bit of time with him. She didn't know why, but she always just felt so warm when she was near the elder blonde brother. A short burst shot through her body and Akeno widened her eyes. I will be right back. She quickly ran down the hall and into the bathroom. Somehow her body had neglected to inform her of her need to use the restroom until it became incredibly dire. Naruto stood there was a small amount of confusion on his face before he gave a light shrug. Akeno didn't take too long to come back and seat herself across from him at the bench, slurping the noodles up from her cup. Dinner was a quiet affair, and the two parted ways with Akeno moving to the guest room and tucking herself in for the night, trying to rid herself of a spinning room as she did, the empty bottle resting on the nightstand beside her. His blue eyes blinked themselves open, protesting slightly against the action, though he didn't see the normal color of his incredibly pale orange wall. No, instead there was black hair in front of his face. His lips pursed as he found that his arm was no longer under his control. It would seem that something had taken it into its clutches during the night. Which in itself was impressive. He was normally a very light sleeper, he should have awoken as soon as his door opened, yet this person was laying on his bed, holding his arm draped over her waist, and in between her impressive bust. I hope you're Akeno, or this is going to be a strange morning. There was a soft giggle as the form turned around, blinking her violet eyes at Naruto. I am. Now for what reason did you sneak into my bed, Naruto-kun? You're in my apartment, Akeno, and this is my bed. When I left you last night you were in the guest room." Shrugging to himself, Naruto got up and looked at the time. "Red will be here soon, you should get up too." He had taken his pants off before bed, thankful that he left his boxes on last night this time. Picking them up off the ground, he let out a sigh as he walked down the hall, never paying attention to the eyes trained on his behind as he entered the bathroom. Akeno slowly woke herself up and looked around the room she was in. It was quite clean, so long as you didn't mind the desk. It seemed to be covered in many sheets of paper, character profiles and backstories littering the pages, if her quick glance was correct. Moving around, she saw her name on the wall. Name: Himejima Akeno, surname first. Age: 17, corrected from 16 as it would appear that I have missed her birthday. Peace. Queen. Race: Devil, Human, Fallen. Personality: somewhat flirtatious. She seems to care deeply for her friends, though even going out of her way to make sure that they are comfortable in what they are doing. Currently she seems to be acting as a mediator between myself and Red. A kind girl, though she seems to be under some pressure from the students at Kuo, having placed her on a pedestal. Likes: seems to enjoy oriental tea and ceremonies, may be attributed to her upbringing in the Himejima clan before the murder of her mother. Though strangely she seems to be both a sadist and a masochist. Dislikes: angels, both fallen and otherwise. Akeno seems to have a dislike to herself as well, believing her blood to be dirty or cursed. She dislikes people bad-mouthing her friends, but will sometimes wear a strained smile when she is trying to keep the peace between groups. Issue: Akeno has an issue with her father. I wasn't able to get much, but it seems like he wasn't able to save her mother in time. Maybe her young eyes missed the fact that her father was trying so hard. I do not know. I do not believe that it is my place to intervene, though regardless I think I should try to ease her into. Find something interesting, Akeno. A voice mused behind Akeno, causing her to freeze in her tracks. The page was plucked from her hands, and his blue eyes skimmed it for a moment. How do you know so much about me?" she questioned weakly. Naruto gave a small shrug. "I did some digging, just like I know the reason that Rias is so frantic about forming her peerage. She wants to be able to challenge Rias or Phoenix to break off the marriage contract between their families. Information is powerful, and the more of it I have, the better I can write about something. Plus you devils are quite bad at hiding things. I wonder if Rias knows why she is in charge of this area or not." Naruto mused lightly to himself before lightly pushing Akeno on the shoulder. "Now out of my room." But you. Yeah, each member of the peerage has a sheet just like yours. Akame has one, and even Kaneko's older sister has one, though Kuroka's is much longer than anything I have on you guys, sans red that is. He pursed his lips slightly before lightly pushing Akeno again. "Out, I have things I am working on in here, things I don't want people to see, so out." Still a little shocked, Akeno walked out of the room, blinking rapidly as she approached the guest room only for Kiba to open his door, his eyes glassy from sleep still, but quickly coming together. He was wearing a pair of tracksuit pants like Naruto, and in his right hand was a blade, pointed forward. He met eyes with Akeno, and both gave the other a shocked expression. "Akeno-senpai. Ara, is your sword always this ready in the morning, Kiba-kun?" She managed to give a small teasing despite her situation, watching as his cheeks gained a light dusting. What are you doing here so early?" He managed to get out despite the nervous feeling in his chest. "She stayed the night, Kiba. Oh, also I am pretty sure that Kaneko is now a tomato and she is seated on our couch." "Nai-san, you're back. Did you sleep well last night?" Kiba questioned, somewhat surprised that Naruto was home already. Normally he wouldn't be looking at coming back until dinner time tonight. Naruto walked out of his room and closed the door behind him, a questioning look in his eye. "You've gotten a bit stronger, Kiba, keep it up and we might spar again." With that he walked down the hall towards the kitchen. "I am starting on breakfast, so hurry yourself up and get ready for the day, both of you." Akeno watched as Naruto walked by. Just how much did he know about them all? A small call of good morning Chibi earned a small smile on her face. At the least he seemed to care for them all somewhat. Thankfully she had a spare change of clothes in the guest room from when she changed into her dress last night. After a quick shower she would be fine, maybe some painkillers to dull the throbbing of her head as well. Rias smoothed out her winter cardigan as she looked at the door in front of her. She was clad in a pair of jeans and a light cream blouse. Taking a breath in, she moved to knock at the door only for it to open and a pair of hazel eyes come into view, giving her a blank stare. "Taking too long," Kaneko explained simply before turning on her feet and entering the apartment again. Rias blinked in slight shock. She hadn't expected Kaneko to be here. Though now that she was here she couldn't push it back any longer. Nodding to herself and steeling her nerves she walked in, closing the door behind herself and taking her shoes off, her designer bag hanging from her shoulder as she softly stepped through the hallway. The wonderful smell of what seemed to be breakfast reaching her nose. She was not under the impression that Naruto cooked. She had always believed it to be Kiba, as his bentos looked so well made. though Naruto seemed to believe he could, and if breakfast tasted anything like it smelt, then she would have to believe in him too now. Humming around the corner she was forced to pause again. Akeno was sitting there with a cheery smile on her face, her head resting atop her hands with her elbows propped against the bench below her. Though there was something out of place, it took her a few moments to figure it out, though when she did Rias felt like hitting herself. Akeno was wearing Naruto's jacket, it was much too big for her, and in fact made her look incredibly cute. Was starting to wonder if you were going to come in red, though it seemed like Chibi decided against my wait and see method. The voice was deeper than she had heard in a while. Turning to her left she saw Naruto standing there in his glory, his blonde hair was a little longer, and his muscles seemed to be more defined, sculpted even out of the finest marble. Yes, she had seen him recently from his appearance on television, though he was nicely dressed then and wasn't showing off his body. A body that males would die to have and females would kill to ogle. She saw the markings on his shoulder, pondering when he got a tattoo, though it didn't go much further than that. "Not Chibi," came the monotone reply from across the room. Sitting down at the couch was Kaneko, who was sipping at a cup of tea, her stoic gaze though was strictly focused on the tray of biscuits in front of her. "Now you're Chibi, all this bundle of awesome wrapped into a small package, or would you prefer lowly?" There was a slight chuckle from Naruto, while Akeno giggled. Rias had to wonder if this was normal for them, everyone seemed so at ease just relaxing in the morning. It is red, she is late, is she not? Ah, it was Alpha, it had been a while since she last heard him, she didn't even really hear people speak about him anymore. No, now that she thought about it, she didn't even know that Kaneko and Akeno would see Naruto outside of school. Though after last night she should have figured that they would be close, Akeno did go out to a party with Naruto and let him take care of her apparently. Though Akeno seemed way too pleased with herself, no way, she wouldn't, would she? Akeno's smile only grew wider as she saw the horrified look cross Ria's face. "Why you didn't, did you? Oh, so you can speak red, I had thought you became a mute," Naruto offered. Rias crinkled a brow in confusion before noticing that she hadn't replied to him at all. With a haphazard blink at her misconduct, she gave a small bow. "Sorry, I was just a little nervous. I guess things have changed since we last met after all. You have become quite famous now, correct?" Butcho asked, even though she watches whenever you are on TV. How cruel of her to play pretend, Akeno quipped, quickly causing Rias to blush. "If you were asking Akeno about us sleeping together, well, we did, in the sense that she was able to sneak into my room while I was sleeping and curl up next to me," Naruto reasoned as he moved further into the kitchen and flipped what was on the stove with a quick movement of his hand before seemingly dancing through the kitchen and doing a large number of tasks in a rather fluid movement. Rias took a seat next to Akeno and blinked in shock when a cup of tea was placed in front of her by Naruto. She hadn't even seen him move to give it to her, yet she saw his strong hand leaving it in front of her seat. He was moving so fast, or was it just with organized practice, that he was able to know when he could and couldn't do everything in front of him to the best to give the best results for his actions. "It is in Nai-san's feet," Kiba explained, causing Rias to look down at the older blonde's feet. He was hovering just off the ground, giving him the ability to slide all over the ground using his magic. How much would have had to train to be able to move like that without tripping over or sliding well past his target? It lasted a few minutes longer before breakfast was served. It was a simple meal: some fish, rice, bacon, scrambled eggs and a small side salad along with toast. Rias thought it looked much too simple, though upon tasting it, she noticed that the dishes were filled with herbs and small amounts of spices to give it a bit of an extra kick. Like normal, breakfast was a relatively quiet affair, Kaneko and Kiba leaving to go train shortly after it. Apparently it was the reason that the Chibi had come over, not for the breakfast that she never missed, but to get Kiba so that they could train together. Akeno was looking between the two still left with her. Naruto was doing the dishes, while Rias seemed to be mulling over her thoughts, probably on what to say. Naruto Rias trailed slight, hearing him put down the dishes that he had just finished drying. "I haven't asked anything of you before, but I think I will try it now," Akeno inwardly sighed while Naruto rose a brow. Wondering where she was going with this, "Do you think it would be okay if we tried to start things over between us? I understand that I may have just been giving out orders before, and because of your situation, you cannot refuse. You notice that now, do you, Red?" Naruto mused out softly. He refilled the teacup in front of Rias and got himself a cup of coffee. Akeno looked up at him with a confused glance. "You're here often enough that you know where everything is now anyway." Akeno pouted. "So you treat Rias differently to me?" "Of course, Red isn't here every second day for dinner." Naruto turned to the raven-haired girl who just continued to pout. "Basically it means that I don't trust her in my kitchen yet." Letting out a small sigh, Naruto picked up his cup of coffee and took a long sip from it. "To start over would mean that we would have to pretend that what has happened never did. That would mean pretending that I never wrote Bloodstained Sister, also that Akane either never existed or that she was still alive. We cannot start from the start. But I am willing to give this friendship you are offering a chance," Naruto finished, his deep blue eyes scanning Rias for her reaction to his words. Her sea foam orbs blinked once, twice, it seemed as if she was wrapping her mind around the words that were still hanging in the air for all to hear. You're right, trying to pretend that nothing happened would be an insult to those that have been caught up in between our relationship. There was a touch of remorse in her voice. Your book, is it accurate? Naruto rose a brow in her direction. Akame, it is very much like what I wrote. There are of course some differences, but even those still stay true to the events that happened around her. Rias lowered her head, then I cannot apologize enough. I have not fully read your book yet, but what I have read so far, Akane was a much better person than everyone painted her to be. I guess we can skip things ahead a bit, the real reason why you're here is quite simple, isn't it, Rias? Akeno and the girl in question gave him surprised looks. As far as they knew, it was the first time he had actually called her by her name. What do you mean? Riser Phoenix. Naruto trailed, watching her eyes go wide as dread started to seep in. How do you kn? I do not think that it matters at this point, to be honest. I am not fond of the idea of an arranged marriage anyway. Alpha, run program number 9. A blue spark appeared next to Naruto, causing Akeno and Rias to wonder where he had been before. Alpha always just seemed to vanish when you weren't watching him closely. Understood. The orb moved around and started to float near Naruto's head, entering into orbit as it glowed dully. Preparations have shifted to 10%. Should we divert all attention to program 9? No, can you make a projection of the current data? Naruto's words prompted Alpha to undergo a transformation of sorts. His body split, well, the orb that made up his body seemed to split down the middle, and a large glowing light shone brightly at the wall behind them, as you can see. Naruto motioned to the image as it straightened out to show Riser with a large amount of information about him scrambled around. I have been spending some of my time coming up with a plan of action to deal with Riser Phoenix and anything he may be able to bring our way. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. As you heard, we have already dealt with 10% of the possible outcomes that would happen, though it would seem that we have run into a snag recently. That recent 10% should be much less, as we decided to include the possible chance of battle in order to resolve the issue. Rias looked in shock as a large amount of lines started flying through the screen, listing different ways that a conversation could turn with just a few simple words. You have put so much thought into this, Rias trailed. A small scoff left Naruto's mouth. Of course. If you were to be married to that perverted freak of nature that calls himself a high-class devil, your entire peerage would more than likely become little more than his playthings and sex toys, and to be honest, I don't want to test if the flaming bird is also a flaming homo. Really, there are some things I just don't want to know. Of course, he was putting in this much effort, the outcome affected Kiba. If Kiba was not drawn into the situation, would Naruto even care about her situation? It was possible. He did say that he didn't like the idea of arranged marriage, though if Akeno asked him to, maybe he would. Akeno after all seemed to be close to Naruto, much closer than she had thought after all. She honestly couldn't picture him being so calm about her sneaking into his room if he didn't at least have some attachment to her. Inwardly she sighed and spared a glance to the girl in question. She was currently wearing his most notable piece of clothing, so much so that it had become something of his image, and neither of them had said a word about it. Though knowing Akeno, she could just be doing it to screw with her, and if she spoke to Naruto about it beforehand, he might have found it best to go along with it just to provoke her. Looking back to the screen, she saw that the information was coming to an end, and that is how I plan on going about this questions. Rias looked at Naruto in shock, she hadn't even noticed he had been speaking. She glanced back to Akeno, who seemed to be okay with what was happening. How long do you think it will take to finish your preparations? At the current rate, a little less than 100 days, Naruto remarked with a small wave of his hand. He didn't feel bothered in the slightest, seeing as action doesn't need to be taken until Red finishes school here, that should be more than enough time. Akeno pursed her lips slightly and thought, if it isn't an issue, do you think you could have it ready sooner? I just want to play on the safer side in case the Phoenix family take action earlier than that. Naruto tapped his cheek a few times. I can rewrite the primary focus of Alpha to have the task done sooner, though my other projects would fall behind. Other projects? Secret. That's not nice, Akeno said with a small pout. Tough, Naruto gave a look of triumph with a small gleam in his eyes in response. Days had passed since that event. Currently Naruto was laying down on the couch, his feet hanging over the edge with a bottle of beer dangling from his fingertips. He had finished his self-study for the month, and now he was relaxing as a way to celebrate. Kiba was out doing that contract thing that devils did. Naruto figured that he should try doing some at some point. He felt his eyelids drop ever so slightly, he could really go for a nap right now. That was until something faint teetered on the edge of his hearing, a soft ringing. No, it felt more like a bell. Sighing to himself, he sat up, pulling the cigarette from his lips and putting it out in the ashtray on the coffee table. Drawing the bottle up, he took a quick drink before hearing the chime of the bell again. It was close, yet it was coming out as a soft sound. Shrugging the noise off, he walked into the kitchen, finishing the bottle in his hand before tossing it in the trash. Walking over to the sink he ran the water for a little bit, making sure it was nice and cold before rinsing his face with it. The bell sounded out again, only this time it was much closer. He reached out to his right and grabbed a cloth to dab away the water still on his face, before blinking his eyes open. He didn't remember putting a cloth down there, maybe Kiba was using it for something earlier. Turning around he looked over his apartment before pausing at something that was out of place. There sitting where he had been moments ago was someone he knew, well, someone he knew of. Her pristine body was shown off as she had stretched herself out, her kimono barely covering the upper portion of her thighs, while the top looked ready to let her beautiful mounds of flesh burst out and greet the world. She shifted her body ever so slightly, the sound of a bell ringing again filled the air as she sat up and looked at him with a seductive smile. "No, you shouldn't stare so much, you know, nya. Hiroka," Naruto muttered, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Oh?" Shock was clear on her face, "So you do know of me, nya. I'm in the same peerage as your little sister." That word still left a bad taste in his mouth, though he could not lie about it. He was in fact a servant to Rias Gremory, however much she wanted to twist the words to make it sound otherwise. "So what does a king killer like yourself want with me?" Hiroka's features tightened a little as she let out a dry laugh. Well, personally, I don't see what the fuss is, nya. But my boss thinks you're a threat, so I came here to give you a choice. Come back with me, nya. "Sorry, but I can't do that. You see, my little brother is still a bit of an idiot, so I am going to need to look out for him for a while," Naruto remarked with a small smile. "I told the boss that nya. She said that if you didn't come then I was to kill you. Sorry, but it is just my job, nya." Naruto gave a small shrug of his shoulders. "No problem, though to be honest, I didn't think I would finish off my day with the pounding of it, but let's get this done." The bright light erupted from Naruto, destroying where Kuroka had been, along with the wall behind her, and everything in between. He paused, blinked a few times and tightened his fist. "Damn it, I just blew up my own apartment." Before he could go much further, though, he saw Kuroka standing outside, hovering in the air with a large amount of purple orbs floating behind her. "Fuck me. Maybe later, nya." Flicking her hand out, Kuroka sent the orbs flying forward. They impacted with the apartment and erupted in a torrent of purple energy, turning everything inside to ash. Thankfully they were on the top story, and she aimed well enough to keep it contained to just his apartment. The smoke though was blocking her vision from her target. That was at least until he shot out of the smoke and took to the sky. Her eyes went wide as she saw proud white wings coming out from his back, resting just beneath darker than night devil wings. "I see why he has everyone interested now, nya." Kuroka thought to herself with a wide smile spreading across her face. Things might be interesting after all. "You know, I was going to cut you a bit of slack, seeing as I had a small bit of respect for what you did to protect your sister. But then you went and blew up my home. I had stuff in there, like books and booze, not to mention some triple F from the other night." Lifting his hand up in front of his face, Naruto slowly clenched his hand. "I just can't forgive you now." Blue particles quickly formed around Naruto before swallowing him whole for a total of 2 seconds. By the time Kuroka had processed what had happened and started to make a move in regard to that, it was already too late as the blue energy broke away, showing Naruto there in the air. His casual wear now gone. From what she could tell, he was in a dark purple leotard, though his waist and below was covered in cloth of a matching color, so she couldn't be sure. The collar of his top was made of fur and stood tall, while there was a deep cut down the front, showing off his well-developed body. Kuroka held back the drool that wanted to slip from her mouth at the display in front of her. Though the impressive regal yet still fearsome-looking claw gauntlets helped to rein in her lustful urges, plus she also had to wonder why this guy was so attached to fur. Was he trying to prove a point of something? Did he really need fur to come from the cuffs of the gauntlets? Kuroka narrowed her eyes as nothing seemed to change sans for his appearance. That was until his chest expanded slowly before becoming more shallow, signaling a deep breath. That was when it all changed. His energy seemed to shoot through the roof. His blue eyes snapped over to her and locked with her eyes. He extended his hand out and a large number of spears of light formed behind him, though they felt strange compared to normal spears of lights, that is, they were an unholy purple in color. Then he closed his fist tight. The reaction was instantaneous as the spears shot forward at speeds that elven archers would be proud of, silently, yet they didn't need sound to convey how dangerous they were. Kuroka stepped between them. There was no explosion, no, they simply vanished when they missed their target. Kuroka could see the last one right in front of her and ducked down to avoid its piercing strike, only to come face to face with the blonde. It was as if he had just suddenly appeared. She quickly threw a punch at him, only for a purple light to erupt and a sudden impact to rock her body from behind. Spinning in the air while she was skidding along, barely able to keep herself from tumbling from the pressure, she saw him standing there, hovering in the air with his hand stretched out in a position to strike her. There was a small crackle, and he appeared beside her, floating along through the air with his leg already spinning around to land a rough kick to her midsection. Kuroka could not dodge, so she did the next best thing, bringing her arms up in a hasty block to protect her internal organs. Her bones and muscles protesting under the pressure of his metal-covered leg connecting with her near bare flesh. It didn't last long though as his kick ended with a flick sending her flying even further. She vaguely noted that they had left the city of Kuo, now in the sky over treetops. Far in the distance she could see the lights of where they had started, they looked almost like stars now. Bzzzt. It was the crackle again, almost like a dull buzzer. Her head rolled back slightly, and she saw the covered foot rapidly descending towards her. She didn't fight it, letting her body become limp as his foot connected, her loose body almost wrapping around him before being sent down to the ground. When she hit the ground she quickly thought of what hurt more, her harsh crash or the impact of the blonde strikes. She didn't want to continue testing the theory, so she called on it, her senjutsu abilities, letting herself connect with nature and feeling its power flow through her. Her aching muscles felt slightly numb now and flowing with strength, a grin pulled over her mouth. Like this she could fight him. Though to think that someone who has been a devil for less than a year could force her to go all out. She had attempted to use an illusion on him, though it didn't seem to bother the blonde in the slightest. He also seemed to be in the position of a sacred gear along with being an angel, that in itself left so many questions unanswered. It was impossible for an angel to become a devil, right? Though if he truly was an angel, it would be impossible for him to have a sacred gear, wouldn't it? Pursing her lips slightly in thought she stood up from the small crater she was in, looking at the blonde as her eyes widened slightly. Could he be the child of a seraph? If so it would explain why Office was so interested in him. A seraph didn't have children, though they were the only angels she knew of that could potentially bed a human without falling, leading to the birth of a child like the one in front of her. If that was the case, why would his seraph parent let him become a devil? Even if his life was in danger, wouldn't they zap down and save him from such a fate? Bzzzt. There it was again, quickly spinning on her feet. Kuroka caught the coming fist, feeling her body slide back along the ground from the force, though she kept her stance, seeing his brow rise slightly. This must senjutsu, the power that drove you to insanity, Naruto mused aloud. That was what he had been told and what he had been able to gather. What the hell would you know? Nya Kuroka hissed as she pushed him back before jumping into the air and throwing a spin kick at the blonde, only to have him block with the back of his hand. So you aren't insane? In that case I really can't forgive you. I will break you and force you to answer for what you've done. Your actions I can understand, but leaving your sibling to fend for herself in the middle of the fallout. That is not what the older sibling should be. We should be the back that they can feel safe behind, protecting them from all that is wrong in the world, not thrusting them into it. Naruto rotated his hand, grabbing the ankle from her kick and quickly moving into a spin with his body, swinging Kuroka towards a tree and watching as she snapped it with her enhanced body.